across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, this is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. A lot to talk about. We finally got the Defence Investment Plan, but does it stack up? And was Andy Burnham actually told about the missing $4.7 billion that he is going to have to find as Prime Minister? Apparently he was briefed on these plans, but they slightly forgot to mention that. Also, does it actually fund defence adequately? Are we going to be properly protected? And will the men and women who serve this country have the right equipment? We've heard a lot about drones, huge investment in drones, mainly from a drone who is going away fairly soon. That is Keir Starmer, of course. And we'll hear as well later in the programme about quite a number of other stories. We'll be talking about why we're giving more money to a completely discredited UN body, which apparently gives aid to the Palestinians who aren't in Hamas, who work for it. Starmer as well talking about antisocial behaviour. Apparently thousands of victims have had to flee their homes. Some of the statistics around that astonishing. If you've had to flee your home, or you've thought about it, or you're dealing with antisocial behaviour in your area, I'd love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. I don't think the statistics are clear in terms of actually what this is really all about. We'll also hear about why 83 asylum seekers are being moved into £250,000 homes on the edge of a village, and the grooming gang leader who cannot be deported because of a loophole, even though he is a foreign national. The Archbishop of York says the BBC should focus on ethnic diversity. That is the Right Reverend Stephen Cottrell, a white man who replaced a black man, saying that about the BBC. We'll talk about that a bit later on in the programme. As always, I want to hear your views on everything we're talking about this evening. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note or a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us. So let's hear what the Prime Minister said today about the Defence Investment Plan.
I can also confirm that we are bringing our investment in renewing our nuclear deterrent to £64 billion, a truly national effort, building new submarines, developing a new sovereign warhead, and buying 12 F-35A fighter jets, maintaining our role in guaranteeing British and European security, and leaving our country in a much better and stronger place than we found it.
Well, both the Prime Minister and Dan Jarvis, the new Defence Secretary, said difficult decisions had to be made to find the money. This is what the Prime Minister has said on that.
Some capital projects, for example on roads and energy, which are important but not immediately vital, will no longer go ahead as planned. But this is about taking the necessary choices, the right choices, to protect our nation. It is because we've taken these hard-edged decisions that we are able to increase our spending on defence.
John Healey, the former Defence Secretary, the man who resigned because there wasn't enough money in this plan, well, he was talking in Parliament today. This is what he said.
But threats are still growing. Demands on defence are still rising in this dangerous world, and today's step means that we will be spending as a nation 2.7% of GDP on defence in 2030, the date that NATO now warns we could face a Russian attack. So with European security at stake, would my right honourable friends agree that more needs to be done in the months ahead, beyond the dip, to develop a clear, credible funding plan that will hit 3% and that will meet our NATO commitment of 3.5% by 2035.
John Healey speaking there, referring to the DIP, of course, the Defence Investment Plan. Well, for his view on this, I'm delighted the Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, MP, Conservative, is with me in the studio. Hi, Mark.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
Does this add up? Will it work? Will it help?
No. We're calling it the Deficient Investment Plan because it is deficient. If I give you the context, and I'll explain why I say that. When Labour published the Strategic Defence Review on the 2nd of June last year, all the three authors of it, that Lord Robertson, former Labour Defence Secretary, former Secretary General of NATO, you know, unimpeachable credentials, and General Sir Richard Barrons and Fiona Hill, who's a very well-respected academic, they were all adamant that you needed to spend 3% of GDP on defence in order to fund what was in their plan, to rearm against the Russian and Chinese
and
threat.
GDP, obviously, what the country makes, gross domestic product.
Yeah, 3% of yes, exactly, of what the country is generating. So the dip, but we were told at the time of the Defence Review, the details of how we will get there and the actual programmes and the kit we're going to buy will be in this subsequent thing called the Defence Investment Plan. And that was going to come out in the autumn, then it was going to be out by Christmas, then early in the new year, and then definitely the spring. And here we are now in the middle of June.
End of June?
Yeah. So the key question is, does this document, I've got it here, I was there for the debate, does it fund that plan? And the answer is no. By 2030, it will be 2.68%. It's exactly the same amount that John Healey resigned over. Mm-hmm. And what they've done is they've rounded it up to 2.7 as an accounting exercise. But in other words, this falls billions short of what you need to actually pay for that plan. The defence chiefs wanted another 28 billion over 4 years. This provides 15. There's still a massive gap, and it relies on 10.7 billion pounds of so-called efficiency savings. That's cuts in pub English, in order to, from the MOD budget, in order to recycle that money. And they've been very vague about where those cuts will come from. And you referred to it, 4.7 billion of that will have to be found in another public expenditure round.
But Dan Jarvis, who is the new Defence Secretary of a few weeks, he says the extra money was needed because Labour had, as he put it, inherited a defence programme that was underfunded, overcommitted and insufficiently attuned to the threats we now face. 47 out of 49 programmes were delayed or over budget. That is not a ringing endorsement of how the Conservatives run things.
Well, I was on the Defence Select Committee for 7 years, Peter. In fact, I think you even interviewed me. I railed against the inefficiencies of our procurement system. We've got a new frigate programme, the Type 26. It's a world-beating frigate. It's taking 11 years to build it. The Japanese build a comparable ship in 3 years. Mm-hmm. So our procurement is still far too bureaucratic. I mean, I could drown you in committee Hansards where I've gone on about that. But fundamentally, it was you had to spend 2% of GDP on defence. That was the NATO tariff, if you like. We always spent that money. But clearly the world has changed and has become more dangerous. And the cost of NATO membership, if you like, has gone up. Now, in order to fund that plan, Labour's plan to rearm, you must spend 3% of GDP on defence. This is 2.7. It misses it by a country mile. So they failed to fund their own plan. That's the absolute bottom line of it. That's why it's a deficient investment plan.
If you were Andy Burnham and you hadn't been told, apparently, according to The Guardian, who were reporting that this evening, about the 4.7 billion he had to find, that's not nothing.
No, if I were him, I'd be furious. And during the debate, someone said to Dan Jarvis, I think it was Lincoln Jopp, who's an ex-Scots Guards officer, said to Jarvis directly, has Andy Burnham signed off on this plan? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And he ducked the question. Mm-hmm, now, if he had, he would have said, yes, of course he has. So by his avoiding that question, I take it that he hasn't. And I bet Burnham didn't know about the 4.7 billion. So, look, if as seems likely, he becomes Prime Minister within 2 or 3 weeks' time, this is going to be the biggest thing in his in train. The first duty of government, above all others, is the defence of the realm. He's inherited a defence plan which is chronically underfunded, and the Chief of Staff wanted 28 billion. They've been given barely 15. So that's the biggest problem he's going to have in his intro. What's Andy Burnham, who doesn't have much of a track record in defence, what's he going to do about filling that gap?
And we already have ministers kicking off about this. Hamish Falconer, who's a Foreign Office minister, he has said that there's a road building programme in his area, in his constituency, that the money has been taken away from. Keir Starmer, in the clip that we heard there, saying they've taken money away from various things. If they're doing that now with these cuts that are already there, to find another 4.7 billion is going to upset a lot of other people just as Andy Burnham comes in. Do you think Keir Starmer has, done this deliberately with Andy Burnham? Is that too conspiratorial?
I think the reason Starmer was so keen to get this published was this was going to be part of his legacy. But I'm afraid if that's what he was trying to do, bluntly, he's failed. It's a failed legacy because he's failed to fund a plan that was drafted by a former Labour Defence Secretary and Secretary-General of NATO, not by a Conservative, by a Labour, highly respected Labour man. And he and his two compatriots were adamant. I remember when it was published a year ago, you must spend 3%. This offers 2.7 by 2030.
So we're missing it by billions.
Billions. Oh, it doesn't even touch sides. And Jarvis was asked repeatedly, including by my boss, James Cartlidge, the Shadow Defence Secretary, in what year will you hit 3%? Where do you hit that magic number that means you can start to fund? And he consistently ducked the answer time and time again. So we've waited a year for this. We've waited a year to be told how they're going to pay for it, and they've completely failed to explain how they're going to do it.
Tell us about the disclaimer in this as well that you found in this document. This is fascinating.
Extraordinary. So if you know I do have this habit of reading the documents, right? So
it'll never catch on.
Yeah. So page 79 tells you the 10.7 billion pounds worth of cuts they're going to find, but doesn't give much detail. Opposite that on page 78, this is what it says. The investments described in this document represent planned and future priorities, reflecting assumptions at the date of publication. The figures presented are indicative rather than precise cost estimates. They do not constitute binding commitments and are subject to the government's approvals processes, affordability considerations and contracting procedures. Figures have been rounded and therefore may not sum. That's like the small print at the bottom of your insurance policy that says if you get burgled, unfortunately, we won't reimburse you. I've never, in 25 years as an MP, having read a lot of MOD documents, seen a disclaimer like that. That, in pub English, means you can't trust anything that's in this report.
They might argue that actually they've got to wait and see what Andy Burnham thinks. I mean, he could, in theory, scrap all this in a few weeks.
Well, if he does, and again, I make the point again, forgive me, because it is important, Peter, if he'd signed all this off, even if he knew about the 4.7 billion, I'm sure Dan Jarvis would have told us. And the fact he ducked it, to me, means he didn't, knowing how Parliament works. And Burnham's going to have to do something about this. He's inherited a plan that doesn't work. First year of government's the defence of the realm, brand new Prime Minister, so he writes his 4 letters to the Trident boat submarine commanders. The next thing he's got to do is say where that other money's going to come from.
Let me put something to you from Chris in Newbury. He says, tell Mark Francois, no, the MOD don't get a single penny as MPs vote down net zero targets. Why should MPs grandstand over MOD spending when they give away our energy security to Russian gas and Chinese wind turbines? They're all just jokers gaslighting the British public. The MOD deserve nothing until MPs stop lying to the public. What would you say to Chris?
Well, I'd say we live in... Chris is lucky to live in a free country where he can express an opinion and no one's going to knock on his door at 2 o'clock in the morning and drag him off to Siberia. And he's only able to live in that free country because he has armed forces which ultimately defend that right of democracy and a free society. And if you don't fund your armed forces properly, history shows you what happens. I say that as the son of a D-Day veteran. In terms of energy security, it's absolutely bonkers that we're now having to import Russian oil when we're refusing to drill new oil fields in the North Sea, and that's down to David Eco-Loon Miliband. Ed Miliband.
I think they're both Eco-Loons as well.
Forgive me, David, I don't want to libel you.
David Miliband, interestingly, said that He believes that we could take 5 times as many asylum seekers as we do. He said that in 2017, so it'll be interesting if he becomes Foreign Secretary. Speaking of Foreign Secretaries, Yvette Cooper has announced an extra £23 million for Palestinian refugees in Gaza through UNRWA. The pledge follows her warning to Labour friends of Palestine in the Middle East last night that the government cannot just keep hoping and not acting. She also took aim at Israeli attempts to control aid flows into Gaza, telling the group aid cannot be withheld as a bargaining tool for a peace process. What I find quite strange is 2 things. One is UNRWA is, as we were discussing last night, is a completely discredited organisation which has people actually working for it, being paid by the UN, being paid by our taxpayers' money, who are members of Hamas. They have sacked a number of people, sacked more of them recently for that. And the second thing that worries me is this fiction that there's a famine in Gaza. I'm not saying for a second that things are nice in Gaza. Gaza's a war zone. It's horrible. I want people to be free. I want them to be free from Hamas. But many, many people, thousands of people, probably over 1 million people in Gaza have smartphones, yet we see 0 pictures of people who are suffering from famine. We've seen pictures of emaciated children, but they have congenital diseases. So why do you think, Mark, the Labour Party and the Labour government is giving another £23 million of our money to a discredited organisation?
Well, it is absolutely empirically correct that a number of people have been sacked from UNRWA when they've been exposed as working for Hamas. Whatever side you are on the Middle Eastern debate, that is an empirical fact. So we all hope that the ceasefire holds. Look, Burnham comes in, he's going to appoint a new cabinet, and he's going to have to pick a foreign secretary. You mentioned one candidate a moment ago. There's a lot of manoeuvring going on within the Labour Party at the moment about who might get what job. And Dan Jarvis seems content to remain as Defence Secretary, although he's going to have the same amount of money in 2030, pretty much, that John Healey felt he had to resign over on a point of honour. It might be that some of this is more to do with internal Labour Party politics than anything else.
Very interesting. As David Miliband in 2010, the only politician who's ever left politics to spend less time with his family. Mark, thank you very much indeed. That's Mark Francois there, the Shadow Defence Minister. What do you make of what he said? 0344 499 1000. I'd love to hear your views. Do give me a ring and we'll make sure we get you as many people as possible on the air between now and 10 o'clock. We'll go to the debate desk next. The former Labour Minister Bill Rammell will be with us, as will the former number 10 advisor Tom Skinner. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including Dawn in Chelmsford, who says, good evening. It's clear we must now scrap net zero and redirect the budget into defence. In the unlikely event that we ever achieve net zero, it won't stop Russian missiles, says Dawn. Becca says, why didn't the Tories put more money into the defence for 14 years? Also, thank you to this person, Penny in Essex, who says, good evening, Peter. Burnham hasn't once mentioned migration. Anyone who can stop the UK being swamped by these freeloaders with their disrespect for women and a culture which is alien to us will have it made. Is it because the ones who are allowed to stay will vote Labour? I can't think of any other reason for encouraging them in, says Penny, who also says, I hope you feel better today. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm recovering from just a little cold. I'm delighted to go to the debate desk. For the first time, we're joined by the former Labour Minister, Bill Rammell. Great to have you on the debate desk. How are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Great stuff. Bill is a former armed services minister, sort of number 2 at the MOD. I know you worked in the Foreign Office as a minister as well, so a very good person to have today, any day, but particularly today, given the defence investment plan, equipping our forces, defending our future is what they say. It's already been criticised by Mark Francois, but we'll see what Bill says in a second. And Tom Skinner's with us as well, former number 10 advisor. Lovely to see you. How are you doing, Tom?
Good, thank you, Peter. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Let's start with the defence investment plan. Is it fit for purpose, Bill? Does it do the business?
Well, I think it's welcome, but it doesn't go far enough. And I think Andy Burnham, when he becomes Prime Minister, is almost certainly going to want to increase defence spending further.
Even within this plan already, he's got to find another 4.7 billion in his next budget. That's a lot.
Yeah, no, what is it? You know, the public spending is.
You know, they say $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Sooner or later, it all adds up to real money.
But you can find money like that. You know, you cut back elsewhere, very small amounts, and you can generate.
Keir Starmer tried to save $5 billion on the welfare bill, and he had a backbench rebellion.
Yeah, but there are areas you can make savings. Also, you know, Lord Jim O'Neill, who's going to be one of Andy Burnham's key economic advisors, has said that within the existing fiscal rules, there's room for more borrowing. So that may be part of the solution. The thing that I find staggering is it would have only taken about $5 billion more to stop John Healey from resigning. And it's taken 12 months to get here, and I'm at a loss to know why Keir and Rachel Reeves couldn't find that money. Nevertheless, it's a good outcome. I think the delay has undermined the degree to which it is a good outcome. I mean, this is a 27% real terms increase over the course of this Parliament. That is by far the biggest uplift in defence.
But even NATO saying that's not enough, saying that it should be 3%. And Mark Francois said the question was asked a number of times today, when will the 3% of GDP actually be reached? And Dan Jarvis didn't know, or at least didn't say.
And Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General of NATO, has said that this is absolutely a step in the right direction. Look, it's a significant uplift to defence spending. I think it needs to go a bit further, and I think in a few weeks' time we will probably see that come to fruition, or certainly by the stage of the budget in the autumn.
Tom, what do you think?
I don't know what's taken them an entire year to get to this stage. I think what they announced today is absolutely the floor of what they would have ever announced realistically anyway. So I don't know what negotiation has been going on that's meant they couldn't have done this a year ago. They'd have saved John Healey from resigning and perhaps even saved or delayed Keir Starmer's departure as Prime Minister.
I was just thinking that, actually, on the politics. We'll get a view on Bill from that in a second, but we'll come back to the politics. But tell us the policy first.
Yeah, it is an uplift, and you're right about that, but it really was absolute baseline of expectations, and it still doesn't meet any of the strategic review criteria. So what have they been doing? And I think if they just grasped the nettle months and months and months ago, announced it with the promise of more funding to come, I think they could have drawn a line under all this defence debate that we've been having and certainly kept John Healey in the tent.
What do you think of that in terms of how long it has taken and the political cost for Keir Starmer that this has meant to actually get to the stage today where we have the Defence Investment Plan published and in our hands? Well,
look, I think Keir is a decent public servant, but I think his failing is that his written authority doesn't drive the government. And, you know, he hasn't been willing or able to intervene to grapple with this challenge, this disagreement.
I mean, that's just straightforward leadership, is it not?
Yeah, and it is. But you know, he should have grasped the nettle. I understand where the concern comes from. I mean, you know, I was a Minister of State for the Armed Forces. The Ministry of Defence is atrocious at public spending.
Yes.
Tens of billions of pounds lost on procurement, you know, hanging on to legacy projects for the vanity of particular services is not the right way forward.
And Dan Jarvis would support what you're saying there. He said the extra money was needed because, in his view, Labour had inherited a defence programme that was underfunded, overcommitted and insufficiently attuned to the threats we now face. 47 out of 49 programmes were delayed or over budget. Why is it that the Ministry of Defence doesn't seem to be able to do its job, especially when it comes to procurement, when it comes to doing things on time and within budget? And it doesn't seem to me, and I'm not making a party political point here, it seems that parties of all shades don't seem to be able to get a grip on the department itself. It seems a law unto itself. I
think on procurement that's a fair challenge, but forgive me, I will make the point that the armed services had been denuded by the last government. You know, Ben Wallace, the previous Tory Defence Secretary, made that very clear as a criticism. But there's a bit beyond that, which is about the way the Ministry of Defence operates. And what people don't appreciate is that actually the senior military virtually have a veto on every major project, and they overspec it, they change the specs, that builds in delay, the project changes, there are cost overruns, and you literally get tens of billions of pounds wasted through procurement. That hasn't been sufficiently gripped by successive governments of all political persuasions, and that needs to change.
Is part of it that the military figures are just going to be there for a bit longer than the ministers? That they see people, even people with the stature of Al Carnes as Armed Forces ministers, as sort of here today, gone tomorrow politician?
There's an element of that, but there's also, I mean, look, you know, I've got the highest regard for the guys on the front line.
Of course.
I've got less regard for the senior military leaders who, bluntly, in my direct experience, are really not very good managers of the services. You know, they've got separate systems, ways of doing things between the different services. They've got this massive over-specification and changing specification for procurement. And all of that builds in additional unnecessary costs.
Does this chime with your experience, Tom?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And where I do feel sorry for Labour is that throughout the last 20 years, well, really since the Falklands, defence hasn't been a political issue. So actually, it's been far too easy for governments to reduce the funding, to underfund the big major investment projects that have been going, cancel battleships and that sort of
Richard Kemp makes much the same point, Colonel Richard Kemp. He says really since the end of the Cold War it just hasn't been.
Absolutely, and actually it's got to the point where suddenly defence is a political issue and we found ourselves caught with our pants down. That's not actually this government's fault. It's probably not just the fault of the previous governments. It does go back, as you say, a really, really long time. It goes back to the fundamentals of defence procurement, which is you're always looking really far ahead before you make these decisions. It's actually quite difficult to do, which means you need to make very, very clever, calculated bets for the long term on what the capability is you're going to need in a decade's time. And the way that warfare has changed so dramatically in the last couple of years, and the innovation in Ukraine has just changed the landscape of warfare totally, and you've now got $1,000 drones destroying millions and millions of pounds worth of equipment.
Is the emphasis on drones within this actually something that we can welcome?
Yeah, we certainly need to do that, but it's also cyber warfare. Space is going to become increasingly important. I think one of the sad things, I think, from the previous governments is that we spent far too much time looking at the military through the nice things we look at. So as long as there's some guys in red tunics in front of Buckingham Palace and the red arrows can fly over, defence is fine because, look, we can do a fly past and we can perform, we can walk up and down the Mall on a big state occasion, and we think, look at the brilliance of the British Armed Forces. But actually, scratch below the surface, the bits that people don't actually see, and it's a hollowed-out mess.
One thing that really concerns me is the military housing. The budget for military housing has gone down in this plan, and there are so many veterans and Army families and RAF and Navy families and Marines families that watch this programme, that are listening to it, and so on. Just a lot of people from the military who really care about that, and that is one thing that jumped out at me, that was something that we just need to prioritise Army housing for people who do service on the front line, Bill.
And that concerns me. Having said that, there has been a big investment in military housing under the last Tory government and certainly under this Labour government, you know, there's been 3 above inflation pay increases for the armed services. But, you know, we need to see the detail of that and how that will work out. Yeah. But there's a broader political point. We're both in agreement that there is a need for significant extra defence expenditure because of the major threats that we face globally. I'm not sure that's where the public are. I don't think there's yet sufficient grip and understanding of why extra defence spending is necessary.
So how do we get that?
Well, I think it's a failure of political leadership that we're not telling the public of those things. One of the things for one of the key things for any prime minister or political leader is you have to explain to the public why you're making difficult decisions. There's no point sitting around and waiting and saying, "Oh, the public don't really care about this, so I won't make the investment." That's why we've got in this in the first place. Absolutely, it's political leadership, and you've got to make a decision and explain to people why you've made it. Previous very, very successful prime ministers have done exactly that.
So, without scaring people and saying Russia's coming to get you, there are some politicians who don't quite say that, but along the lines of talking about the cyber threat, talking about China, for example, but you know, the most recent war that we could have entered and didn't, Iran, for example, I have seen, I'm not talking about entering or not entering that war, I'm talking about the threat from Iran on our doorstep, the fact that there are agents here, the fact that there was a journalist a year ago who was stabbed and could have been killed, the fact that there are many cyber attacks by China, by Russia. That doesn't seem to be nearly as much a focus for politicians as it should be. Would you agree with that, Bill?
Yeah, no, I do. And I think this goes back over successive governments, but I think one of the failures of this Labour government has been a lack of narrative and storytelling to communicate effectively with people about the scale of the challenges we face and how we're going to overcome them. And I think that is certainly the case with defence, where, yeah, whether it's Russia, whether it's China, whether it's North Korea, whether it's Iran, there are a scale of challenges that are significantly more threatening and dangerous than when I was an armed forces minister in 2009.
And other countries seem to get through the politics and explain to people why they need big military spending. We just seem to try and do it on the cheap.
Let's hear a voice note from Daryl, who's been in touch and sent through a voice note on 0344 499 1000.
I just can't believe what's going on with this government. I mean, Rachel Reeves, she's not fit to structure a bus timetable, let alone run the finances of this country. She's diverting that money for the defences. She's taking it away from road infrastructure improvements. I just can't believe she's doing such a stupid thing. Then they're giving these illegal immigrants these brand new houses for £250,000. I'm working 60 plus hours a week, sleeping out in my lorry every night to live in a house that's worth nearly half that value. And then they're just swanning across on a dinghy and getting given one. And you think, what am I doing? You know, this country is so stupid. The politicians are so selfish and greedy. I'm just sick of them.
Daryl, your point on fairness, particularly when it comes to the migrants' housing, is absolutely the heart of that story. We're going to talk about that in just a minute with Bill and Tom on the debate desk. If you want to join Daryl on the air, if you want to give me a ring, if you want to send me a message, the main number is, of course, 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Chris, who's texted me to say, if and when Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister and moves number 10 up north, can't 10 Downing Street be used to house asylum seekers? That's Chrissy in Heybridge in Essex. Angie says, hi Cardi P, there is absolutely no hope in my heart when it comes to Labour, and I think some people are getting confused and thinking Burnham will change the country, when in fact he's just another Labour member, a massive Corbynite and a Blairite. I'm not sure it's possible to be the same thing at the same time, but there we are. In my opinion, says Angie, he's just going to bring in everything the past leaders pushed for and failed on. He's not going to change the country. I give him 6 months to a year before the IMF gets involved and he has to call an election. David in Canterbury says, what is the point exactly of the military if its purpose is to prevent the invasion and takeover of our country or parts of it by foreigners who don't have our best interests in mind? Then it has already failed, as have successive governments. So what is the point in increased military spending, says David. Well, lots to discuss and all of that. We're on the debate desk with the former Labour Minister Bill Rammell and the former number 10 advisor Tom Skinner. Great to have you. There is a big story, in fact it's the front page of the Sun today, about 83 asylum seekers being moved into new £250,000 homes on a village estate. Now this is a decision that they are arguing anyway is done by Serco, which is a company. It has said that we work under the direction of the Home Office, who decide where people are placed based on overall national demand. The Home Office determines how many people are to be accommodated in each local authority area and instruct us accordingly. The Home Office says the government is restoring order to the system by making record levels of asylum decisions, cutting claims by 12% and increasing removals of illegal migrants by 41%. But 40 minutes ago, the Home Office has said that new processes introduced earlier this year would stop new build sites being considered, so it appears there could well be some form of U-turn on this already. But we've had 83 asylum seekers to be moved into £250,000 homes. One local in Stoke Heath in Shropshire says it's bang out of order. It doesn't feel fair. These people will be living in shiny new homes free of charge, which hard-working local folk could never afford. Emma O'Sullivan, who's 30, said, we were told the new development will be social houses, which was fine, but no one moved in for a year. Now we're told they'll all be used for asylum seekers and they're not part of social housing at all. We feel as if we've been lied to. Bill, so many stories we cover on this network come down to a really straightforward fairness. A lot of people feel this isn't fair. If you want to live in a £250,000 home, most people have to work really, really hard, like Darryl, who sent us the voice note earlier. And fairness is at the heart of this story too, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think most people rightly would see this as being unfair. Look, the backdrop to this is that through the Shabana Mahmood reforms, there's progress being made on immigration. You know, net migration is down by 800,000, the small boat crossings are down by 40%, the processing of asylum claims is through the roof, and that's part of the way that you clear the backlog. And the government is making progress on closing hotels and predominantly moving asylum seekers into former military barracks.
But they're also moving them into private homes, and they're also moving in the homes of multiple occupancy as well, which a lot of people are not happy about either.
Well, and there's more challenges on that front. But houses in multiple occupation. But my clear understanding is that using newly built social housing was never part of the government's agenda. And I don't know if this is overreach by Serco or the way that they're handling it, but I think the government can and should, and by the tone of that statement that you've just read out, I think the government can and should overturn this.
It's literally within the last hour. New houses should never house asylum seekers, says a Home Office spokesman. Earlier this year, the Home Secretary introduced robust processes to ensure new build sites like Stoke Heath can never be considered again. Well, they have been considered, and apparently Stoke Heath predated the new processes introduced by Shabana Mahmood earlier this year. Whether it predates it or whether it doesn't predate it, 83 asylum seekers being moved into £250,000 homes will stick in the craw of many, many people who've worked really hard to afford homes that are not worth as much as that, or maybe the same, but have, you know, it's the question that Darryl was essentially asking, which is, what is the reward for doing the right thing? What is the reward for paying your taxes, getting up early in the morning, working 60 hours a week as Darryl does? Yeah, and Darryl's absolutely right. The communities are and they feel under pressure. There's a lot of pressure on housing, there's a lot of pressure on schools, on hospitals, on roads. And if you take the asylum seeker bit out of it for a moment, if you put any group of people into a village, you put 85 people into any village at any one time, the community will be under pressure. Yeah. If you add on top of that the fact that
these people are asylum seekers, for whatever reason they've come here, just adds extra fuel to the flames there. And with the small boat crossings still being such a totemic issue for the public, you put all that together into a mix, and it's completely understandable that the local community go absolutely wild about it.
What do you think about what Tom and Bill are saying here, and indeed what Darryl said? 0344 499 1000. Give me a ring and we'll take plenty of calls on this between now and 10 o'clock. On that note, actually, we're talking about communities under pressure. I was astonished by some of these statistics that are coming from a charity that has done a poll via YouGov. This is this charity Resolve. 1 in 7 households have considered leaving their area. Antisocial behaviour forcing tens of thousands of people to move house. 1 in 7 households, 15%, have said antisocial behaviour is so bad in their area that they've considered moving home. 6% said antisocial behaviour had driven them out of their homes. So you're talking about more than 1 in 20 people being driven out of their home because of antisocial behaviour. And more than a quarter of people said antisocial behaviour has made them feel unsafe in their area. But this is interesting as well. Nearly 2/3, 63% of those who experienced antisocial behaviour in the past 3 years did not report it. Tom?
Yeah, ASB antisocial behaviour has a really corrosive effect on communities. And I'm not really a sort of hang 'em, flog 'em type guy, but the punishments for antisocial behaviour just really aren't there, and I don't think the people committing these crimes feel any sort of threat. So there's no consequence to their actions. Until that's the case, people are going to act like fools. So I think we really do need some really strong policing, because if people don't feel safe in their homes, it undermines almost everything about their life. And if they're feeling
your home is meant to be your sanctuary,
absolutely.
isn't it?
And if you feel unable to go outside because there's graffiti or petty crime or gangs of youths hanging around on the street corners and things, it's going to make your life really, really miserable. And if people are uncomfortable in their own home and unhappy, it's not surprised that sort of wider community division occurs. So I think the police on this really need to get a grip.
Were you shocked as me, Bill, by some of these statistics?
Yeah, appalled, but not shocked. I mean,
Did you deal with it a lot as an MP?
Yeah, as a constituency MP, I knew the impact and the reach of antisocial behaviour, and it needs to be tackled. The key is the Crime and Policing Act that the government has now passed, and there is good measures in that actually meet that police challenge of modernised respect orders, the sanction for which can be curfews, unlimited fines or 2 years imprisonment, neighbourhood policing, vehicle seizures, but also forcing different agencies to share data about those.
Is that going to work, though? Because a lot of people will say, you ring the police, you say it's a reasonably low-level thing, something's happening in your home. It's horrible for you, but if there's someone making a load of noise or graffitiing or something like that, maybe they're near me, a lot of people stand and smoke cannabis, for example. The police aren't going to come to move them on.
Part of the neighbourhood policing guarantee is that there's a named police officer within every community that people can approach and take these kind of concerns to, and the police do need to act on it. But I've said previously, I think one of my criticisms of the present Labour government is it's not telling stories about what it's doing. When I was an MP, Tony Blair and Charles Clarke, who were then the Home Secretary, came to my constituency and were all over the antisocial behaviour initiatives.
I remember ASBOs.
Yeah, and they were communicating it loudly and clearly and constantly. So there's lots of good stuff that is now in place, but we're just not communicating it and talking about it.
Then you get totemic things like the Prime Minister's trying to resign last week, and you get the man with his megaphone shouting from the end of the street, and the police are not doing anything. So if you're watching that on telly, you think, well, they're not going to arrest anyone in my street for shouting, because they can't arrest this stupid man at the end of Downing Street
Steve
for
Bray.
hollering at the Prime Minister when he's trying to resign in front of his own house. So if your police aren't going to tackle a man who's making a ridiculous amount of noise outside the Prime Minister's home, what hope have any of the rest of us got?
Well, it's also the fact that the government is releasing rapists and killers because they haven't very sensibly kept them in prison for 2/3 of their sentence. So I suppose the question is, what hope is there for low-level criminals if the very highest-level criminals are being let out early, Bill?
But look, I will make a defensive point. This government inherited a prison system that was in crisis. The last government didn't build prison places.
Correct.
This government is now is building 14,000 new prison places, but that will take time. And we were on the point that without the early release scheme, people would commit very serious crimes and we wouldn't be able to put them in cells. And that's not a sustainable position. So with protections, I think early release has got its part to play in resolving that problem. And frankly as well, and this isn't very popular when you say it, I think for very low level of offences, we send too many people to prison in this country.
But if there isn't, I know exactly what you mean. I was a former special advisor in the Ministry of Justice. I know all the arguments around short sentences, but if there isn't a sanction, if there isn't a custodial sanction that you're saying to someone, you know, you've been arrested 150 times for shoplifting, your community orders, your fines, you know, all the things we've tried isn't working, we're going to send you to prison for 6 months. I don't want anybody to be sent to prison for 6 months because I don't think it works, but at the same time there has to be some form of deterrent there.
And if you're a persistent offender, then yes, you've absolutely got to go to prison. But look, prisons are breeding grounds for crime.
They often teach you to be a better criminal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, the levels of recidivism, so people go in for short periods of time, they come out, they can't get a job, they go back to crime, that makes all of us less safe. So I think at that lower end of the spectrum, we should be looking at community sentencing, we should be looking at other means of punishment, we should be looking, as the government is, mirroring it on the scheme in Texas under the Republicans, of releasing people early, tagging them, rewarding them for good behaviour.
They do then execute them, though.
Yeah, they do.
Well,
I'm not advocating that.
An extreme.
But you look at the Texas track record and it's worked, and it's reduced levels of recidivism.
It's a very fair point, actually, because I wrote the speech for the then Justice Secretary at Conservative Party conference talking about increasing for rapists and murderers their time they spent behind bars to 2/3 of their sentence, which was incredibly popular policy. The problem, as Bill correctly says, is there were not enough prison places. Lots of prison places were built, but the net result at the end of 14 years of Conservatives was an extra 500 prison places, which is not nearly enough given the extra people we send to prison. So I'm afraid the Conservatives did fail on that, and I will happily hold my hands up for my 6 months in the Ministry of Justice. Not that I'm sure it made much of an impact, but there we are. Bill and Tom will be back with us in a second. Tell me your thoughts on what they're saying and what you think. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about Nigel Farage as well, and some graffiti that has been in Folkestone with an apparent threat to assassinate him. He has talked about this. The safety of people in public life, and of course people who aren't in public life, is a major issue. We'll get reaction from Bill and Tom and you in just a second. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Here we go. Thank you to Chris in Newbury. He says, your guest says politicians aren't making hard decisions and telling the public why. No, they're making easy ones. They prefer to hand out 800,000 PIP cars, benefits to people with slight anxiety, and as much cash as they can hand out to immigrants. Politicians are cowards, not a penny more to defence until politicians actually make hard decisions, says Chris. Don says the reason the MOD makes so many blunders with procurement is quite simple. There are no consequences for failure in the public sector. I could tell you some stories, but I won't, says Don. Alison says, please ask your guest what's more important, spending on military or migrant housing. Great show. I think we got the answer to that a little bit earlier on, Alison, but thank you. Joanna in Salisbury says, hi Cardi P. Bill's description of military procurement sounds a lot like the NHS. Penny says Yvette Cooper is going to have 23 million of our money to Palestine, which Hamas will soon get their hands on to buy weapons. This woman abuses everyone in the UK financially. She's beyond stupid and on the same level as Ed Minibrain in Penny's opinion. I wonder if this heat is making them all more stupid. Well, I think Yvette Cooper probably has honourable intentions, but UNRWA is a totally discredited UN body. They have people within UNRWA who've been working for Hamas terrorists who have been dismissed by them for doing so, and I think there's a there are many questions to answer on that, Penny. Thank you for your message. Amanda says, if you touch on the subject of Wimbledon, it's been asked why our British players are already out. I believe this is the almost have prizes attitude in schools, which has destroyed the winning agenda. Tom, you're a sports fan, aren't you? Have you been watching Wimbledon?
So yeah, and I was a special advisor at the Department of Culture and Sport.
Ministry of Fun.
Yeah, it was great fun.
Did you get to go to Wimbledon in that role?
No, sadly I did not. I got to do lots of fun things, but not go to Wimbledon.
And why do you think all our players are out? I mean, Emirati Khan's been injured, so it's not because we're playing.
We've got a few injuries, but actually, take Andy Murray out. We've not been particularly good at tennis for quite a long time. It's been masked by having one absolutely world-class player.
Joanna Conta's pretty good as well,
but not sort of
better than you.
Certainly better than me. Certainly better than me.
But as a generation, I think this group, you know, people like Jack Draper and others, I think we've probably got more tennis players in the upper echelons of the rankings than we had when Murray was in his heyday. Yes, he was absolutely world class, number 1 or 2 in the world, but we didn't have a group near the top
I think
to the extent we have today.
We've got a group now of very talented players, just they're not absolutely at the top, whereas before we had one guy who was at the very top and then quite a big gap before.
Emirati Khan hopefully has a bright future as well. There's a lot there. I remember one of my favourite things ever said on the BBC was poor old Tim Henman, who was, like myself, had a bit of a cold towards the end of Wimbledon and was losing his voice, actually, and I think it was John McEnroe said to him, once again, Tim, you can't get past the semi-finals. So there we are, what to do with his voice. Right then, if you are watching Wimbledon, shame on you, you should be watching this programme. But no, indeed, one of my most loyal viewers of this programme was watching Novak Djokovic yesterday, but said that she then turned over as soon as he finished his match, which was very nice of her. Let's talk a little bit about the Treasury and how the Treasury has abandoned numeracy to boost diversity. This is an interesting one because the Spectator has revealed that a sort of fairly basic test on numeracy, which you would imagine would come in quite handy if you're a civil servant working in the Treasury, has now been abandoned. Tom, tell us your thoughts on this.
Of all the institutions to decide that maths wasn't important, the Treasury making this decision it couldn't be a more perfect symbol of a state that's completely lost the sort of what it's actually there for. I know this happened a long time ago, but the fact that numeracy wouldn't be important in the Treasury is staggering. It
is pretty staggering, actually, and if you look at some of the words they've said, the department has decided to as the Spectator says, sabotage its own talent pipeline. The numerical reasoning test, this is a review of the 2019 scheme, the numerical reasoning test was removed due to evidence of the test having adverse impact on candidate diversity. Subsequently, the levels of adverse impact decreased in the 2020 campaign. I don't know about you, Bill. I don't really care what people's background is or their ethnicity or whether they're represented or underrepresented. I want people to know how to use numbers in the Treasury.
Well, it's actually not, a numeracy test is not actually a good predictor of performance and potential, which is what you're looking for. And look, you know, I'm a former higher education minister, a former university vice-chancellor, and, you know, within university admissions, there's something called contextual admissions, which means if you get 3 Bs at sync school, that's probably as good someone getting 3 A's at a private school or a very good
It's
state.
the potential you're looking
It's
for,
the
isn't it?
potential you're looking for, and that's why you bring in those contextual admissions. And when you look at the evidence, most numerical reasoning tests predict performance only weakly once candidates meet a certain threshold. There's also the underlying bias that it is likely that people who succeed most in those tests have had access to private tutoring and all forms of other support.
So they're actually not a particularly good measure, really.
A measure of your potential. But
should mathematical ability generally not be something that we want in our Treasury civil servants?
Of course it should, but as a gauge on do you have the potential, I don't think it's that effective. However, and I've talked a lot about communications tonight, I think this policy, which, forgive me, was in 2019 under the last Tory government, but I think it's been appallingly explained by the department.
OK. Just before we go, in the last few minutes, I just want to talk about Nigel Farage, and he has shared a picture of graffiti in Kent, which he says is calling for his assassination. I mean, it certainly seems to. The Reform UK leader posted the photo on his Facebook page, saying the threat was spread on a wall in Folkestone. The bottom bit we can't really read out at this stage, but the top bit says assassinate Nigel Farage, as far as I can see there. The word assassinate being misspelt there. Clearly, you know, we've had two MPs who have been murdered in the past 10 years or so, Joe Cox and Sir David Amess. This is pretty worrying stuff, Bill.
It is, and I think it's, you know, whether it's Nigel Farage or anybody else, it's absolutely appalling. We live in incredibly polarised and divisive times, and too many people are prepared to take that a step further and advocate or commit acts of violence. You know, I was saying to Tom outside, I never once in 13 years felt threatened, physically threatened as a Member of Parliament. It's now an everyday experience for virtually all of them, and we need to get away from this. It's utterly unacceptable. Tom,
Nigel Farage has made this point. He's put this on his Facebook. He's also argued for a long time that the state should be giving him bodyguards, not just the 25% of the time that they have offered them, but the full-time protection. Do you think he should get that?
Yeah, I've got some sympathy with that. It's all done on a risk basis, but I think for someone as high profile as Nigel is, I think there is definitely a case for it. And it really hit home, this, actually, because Mark Francois was on before we came on, and I really became very good friends with Mark when Sir David Amess was murdered, because I found myself responsible for organising his funeral at Westminster Cathedral and liaising with the security team and all sorts of other people on that. And Mark, who was very, very, very good friends with David, was really looking after the family at that time. And when you see horrific graffiti like this targeting anybody, whether you agree with them or not, it really does sort of shock you to the core and think that any politician is only a few seconds away from a complete lunatic killing him.
And that's just really worrying and dreadful for our society, and we hope Nigel Farage is OK. Police have told Kent Online they're investigating the creation of offensive graffiti in Folkestone. They're working with Folkestone and Hyde District Council to have it removed, and the council themselves said, we have been made aware of the graffiti and one of our officers is due to clear it shortly. So there we are. Thank you both very much indeed. Tom Skinner and Bill Rammell there. Really interesting to hear from them, and you as well. Amanda says surely a camera would have picked up the culprit of the person who had that graffiti. Well, we don't know, of course. We don't know exactly where it is and whether that was covered by cameras, but certainly I'm sure the police will hopefully look into that properly and find the culprit. It is a horrible and very intimidatory thing, and of course all our safety with antisocial behaviour is something that quite a number of people have got in touch about, and we will get to that in just a minute or two as well. There's so much to discuss this evening, particularly those 83 asylum seekers being moved into £250,000 new build homes. We're going to discuss that next, so stay with us for that, and please do give me a shout and let me know what you think about any of the issues we talked about in the debate desk. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note on that message as well. However you want to get in contact, you're very, very welcome to do so. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 8 o'clock. I'm Peter Cardwell. This is the Evening Exchange. Thank you very much for your company. Nigel Farage has been targeted with some graffiti calling for his assassination. We'll speak to his former right-hand man, Gawain Tyler, who is very aware of how many security threats the Reform UK leader faces. The police say they're going to sort it out. We'll see if they do. Also, speaking about home affairs issues, we'll be talking about 83 different £250,000 homes that have been given to asylum seekers. The Home Office seem to have done a U-turn on that within the last hour after some great reporting by our colleagues at The Sun. So much to talk about as well in regard to the BBC, because the Archbishop of York, the number 2 at the Church of England, says that the BBC needs to be more diverse. It will be very interesting to hear what you think about that too. Also, military housing, money being taken away from that in the same time as these 83 migrants are being given £250,000 homes. Seems an odd one to me. What about priorities of this government? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Thanks so much for all your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes already. Keep them coming in. We'll get us many on the air between now and 10 o'clock. Stay with us here on the Evening Exchange on Talk. And thank you to the many people who have wished me well with my cold. I hope I'm feeling a little bit, I'm certainly feeling a little bit better this evening, and the top team behind the glass are getting me a nice Lemsip so I can have that very, very soon. Other brands are available. They're just not very good. Not as good, anyway, as Lemsip. Lots of people getting in touch about antisocial behaviour as well. Some of the statistics on antisocial behaviour, absolutely astonishing. A big survey done, 2,000 people. A charity, Resolve, has done it. 1 in 7 households, 50% of people, have said that antisocial behaviour is so bad in their area they've considered moving home. And tens of thousands of people are moving. 6% of people said it had actually driven them out of their homes. So you're dealing with more than 1 in 20 people who had actually moved because antisocial behaviour is so bad. More than a quarter of people said antisocial behaviour had made them feel unsafe in their area. Nearly 2/3, 63%, said those who experienced antisocial behaviour in the past 3 years did not report it. Well, Mick has sent us a very interesting message on this. He says, the police in my area are non-existent and the council isn't interested. We have a neighbour here that has destroyed his flat twice. He has threatened other neighbours multiple times, but he has mental health issues, so he's let off every time. Also, he is non-white, so nobody wants to deal with him. We also have a big problem with Asian youths who use car parks for their drug use, leaving piles of gas canisters every night. It's a nightmare, but as a middle-aged white man, I'm called racist if I report it, says Mick. Is your experience similar to Mick? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. I also want to talk about a couple of very worrying stories. One of them is something the Home Office appears to have done a U-turn on, even within the last hour, because a total of 83 asylum seekers are to be moved into £250,000 homes on an estate dubbed Migrant Street. This is 21 smart new build houses have been earmarked for the families. Locals up in arms. It doesn't feel fair that these people are living in shiny new homes free of charge, which hard-working local folk could never afford. Also, Emma Sullivan, who's 30, says, we were told that the new development would be social houses, which is fine, but no one moved in for a year. Now we're told they'll all be used for asylum seekers, and they're not part of the social housing at all. We feel we've been lied to. I've got 3 teenage girls. We're really worried. It's not who they are, it's how many there are. It's overloading the infrastructure. There are only 2 primary schools in the area, so if they're all families, that's going to flood the primary schools. It's just they're here, just put up with them. Another person, Melanie Almond, told The Sun, it was like a bomb's gone off and you've got 10 minutes to get out. It's a complete shock. I found out on the internet. We couldn't believe it. Interesting to find out what Gawain Tyler thinks. He's a former spokesman for Reform UK. He was Nigel Farage's right-hand man. Gawain, tell us a little bit about your thoughts on what's been happening in Shropshire.
I mean, from what we can gather in this U-turn on behalf of the Home Secretary, it does feel that the Home Office doesn't know what it's doing. According to the Home Secretary, this wasn't possible. because of stuff that had happened 6 months ago, changes he'd made 6 years ago, yet it's still happening.
Yeah, they've said, in
point,
fairness to the Home Office, they've said it predates the change in policy. So whether the asylum seekers are going to be removed or relocated from the Stokeheath site remains unclear. But local people appear not to have been actually consulted about this. New houses, the Home Office says, should never house asylum seekers. Earlier this year, the Home Secretary introduced robust processes to ensure new build sites like Stokeheath can never be considered again. I think the key word in that is probably again.
Again, isn't it? The word is again, isn't it? I.e., the poor people of that small Shropshire village, which I gather is, what, half an hour walk from the nearest bus stop? So unless these people are given cars as well, they're going to be stuck in the village. There's no shops and things of this sort. How are they going to operate? They're migrants, asylum seekers. Do they have vehicles? Are they going to be provided as well, in order that they can go about their daily lives and go to the shops and do whatever everything they need to do? So not only do they get a nice house that I couldn't afford, and surely the people in the village, particularly with social housing, you build social housing in villages to allow people from the village to actually live in the villages and work in the villages in which they grew up. In large parts of the country, you can't do that. You've got to move to the local town to go to a council estate and things of this sort. So there are places, such as up in Shropshire there, where there has been social housing built, and that is specifically for the local people. That's what it's for. And for them not to be allowed to move in for a year and then migrants to be brought in, this is shocking.
So what happens to those asylum seekers? We all know the plan of Reform UK, and, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people know the Reform UK, and the Conservatives is to basically turn them back and say you can't, if you arrive...
that anybody... Oh, we don't know the details of the individuals in this specific case.
They may not be boat migrants, certainly, yeah.
But if they are illegal migrants, they should not be... Basically, our policy would be nobody who arrives illegally ever gets leave to remain or ever gets this sort of deal. You just don't. We have to stop it. We have to stop the incentive structure. If you discover, when you're sitting in whatever country you're in, that if you turn up in the UK and claim asylum, you can get a nice 2-bed, 3-bed house in the rural part of the country for free, well, it's not going to stop you coming, is it?
And what do you make of this?
You've got to change the incentive structure.
It's interesting when you talk about incentives, because the Home Office has announced another policy within the last 24, 48 hours where they're talking about asylum seekers, if they earn a certain amount of money, a certain threshold, paying back some money, which is specifically in regard to how much money, the cost of them being here, maybe something like £10,000. What do you make of that?
Studies suggest that an average asylum seeker costs hundreds of thousands of pounds each over their lifetime, particularly given the number of actually going to work. But I mean, for example, say you've got this a family in one of these houses, they pay 10,000 back. Well, that's what.
It's a sort of a bit of a drop in the ocean. We also don't know
less than a year's rent for one of those houses.
It's also how much they're going to have to earn first before they do that. I mean, a lot of that just hasn't been worked out. Yeah, it's
going to be a scheme that's worse than the student loan scheme, with vast amounts of non-payment. It is tinkering. It is trying to persuade people that they're going to pay back. They're not.
Do you think the principle's right?
Do you think on benefits for years? They're not going to earn enough to pay back.
Some of them will. I mean, do you think the principle is right?
It's only 10,000. It's nothing on the amount of cost. Nothing.
So what should happen? Should legitimate asylum seekers who come to this country, who don't enter the country illegally, who come through the safe and legal routes that do exist, there's lots in the migration lobby that would have you believe there aren't safe and legal routes.
I would suggest there's very few of them, because, I mean, again, we've got so many... In recent months, we have seen so many examples of fake Christians, fake homosexuals, fake this, fake that. We've got an entire industry stiffing the system. We've even got immigration judges who've been caught doing things to stiff the system. The whole structure is broken. We accept more asylum. When people are rejected from asylum in France, they come here and get asylum. How come? The whole system is broken. I think, as a whole, the country is now fed up, and it's a great shame, because as a country we were so proud of the fact that we were welcoming to those with genuine needs of asylum, but we have been taken had the rise taken out of us for so long and by so much that I think it's time we just stop and say stop.
Yeah.
And we have to deal with the massive backlog of 1 million illegals in this country. We need to go through the asylum claims because so many of them are fraudulent. And then we will have a better idea of those people who genuinely need our help.
The government has also said recently that they want ordinary people, as they put it, to judge asylum appeals. I had a barrister in touch with me today who messaged me to say, well, how on earth is that going to fix things? What's going to happen is there are going to be more appeals. You're not going to get the system working properly, and that's not going to work either. I wonder what you think about that.
Well, the classic, these ordinary people, say I was to volunteer.
I don't think you're going to be appointed. I'm just telling you now. I'm just managing your expectations, Gawain.
Well, say I was to volunteer and suggest that I could be one of those judges.
Yes.
All they would have to do is listen to me just in the last 5 minutes and say that I was inappropriate.
Yeah. No, I think we know exactly the kind of people who are going to be approved for that.
Is those people who subscribe to the current shibboleth.
Yes. Let's talk about one particular migrant. This is Shabir Ahmed, who is shielded by the Immigration Act provision exempting Commonwealth citizens who arrived before 1973. He's a grooming gang ringleader, an absolute scumbag, who cannot be deported because of this loophole. He's 73 years old. He's a key figure in the Rochdale grooming gang scandal. He's due to be released from prison in a couple of days' time, but he can't be thrown out of Britain because of a loophole in the 1971 Immigration Act. Even though he's been stripped of his citizenship while serving prison sentences totaling more than 40 years, he's protected from deportation by a provision in the Act exempting Commonwealth citizens who arrived in the UK before 1973. What should happen, Gawain?
Well, what should happen is if we have the capacity, and our government has the capacity and the will to pass rapid legislation to kick, say, somebody out of the House of Lords, then they can put through rapid legislation to close this loophole.
Yeah,
and we can send him back to Pakistan and tell the Pakistanis they take him, or we cut whatever benefits they get. We have to start playing hardball. Otherwise, we are going to have thugs and ghastly beasts like this man. If you look at what he did over years, why is he going to be on our streets?
Yeah, it's a very good point.
Why? What benefit does this man do for our country at all, in any way? Nothing. And he's not even a British citizen.
Gawain, I wonder if you've seen the horrible story about Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, sharing a picture on Facebook about graffiti in Folkestone. It says the graffiti reads, "Assassinate Nigel Farage." Clearly, the threats to his personal safety are so great that he pays for round-the-clock security, and that is something he feels he has to do. I feel, actually, that the state should do it for him, whether you agree or disagree with Nigel Farage. He is someone who has received so many death threats. You know all about that, of course. You've perhaps received some of them on his behalf or read the emails or whatever.
Oh, I get plenty of death threats over the years, yes. But I think this is just a constant. And the sadness is, yes, Nigel gets an awful lot of it. But the real sadness is, it's not just Nigel. There's a coarsening of debate. There is an encouragement of this. When you have senior ministers calling people like Mr. Farage, people like me, Nazis, guess what? Some people will act like that.
Well, see Yusuf called Conservative and Labour traitors. Should he have done that?
Well, as I say, language has got very, very febrile. But traitor is slightly different than Nazis, I would suggest.
So it's still not very nice. I mean, if you call someone a traitor, you know...
somewhat stronger.
Yeah, but calling someone a traitor is not a nice thing. It's not a positive thing.
I do feel that it's not something I would say, but it is the whole debate is coarsened and encouraged, I fear. And it is, okay, there have one or two comments, but I do see it as a constant litany on one side of the argument. And there is this, sadly, there's this conception amongst many, not all, there are good people on all parties and all political persuasion. I absolutely believe that. But I do see there's a feeling on the left that if you're on the right, you're in some way evil or immoral or in some ways less than fully human, whereas the right regard the left largely as mistaken.
Hasn't that always been the case? Why has it got worse in the last few years, do you think?
I don't know. It's been getting worse for quite a long time, to be frank. And I find it very interesting that the more we teach, and we talk about being kind, and the more we say that children have to be taught in gentler ways, actually the worse people turn out.
Yeah, and anybody who puts hashtag be kind in a social media post usually has a sliver of ice in their heart. Has this been
yeah, precisely. The point is that it's performative decency,
yeah,
but in reality there's something unpleasant there.
Do you think this has been imported from America in terms of their divisiveness? Are we catching up, do you think?
To a certain extent. But I think yes, I think the ideology comes from America. But I think this is largely to do, and I think it's to do with education. Our education system has become very, very be nice, be lovely, be this, be that. And yet we see a rise in abuse of women. We see a rise in this sort of behaviour against Farage and other politicians. And let's be honest, female politicians get it a hell of a lot worse. They get it far worse than male politicians.
You're absolutely right.
They really do. So there's something strange. We pretend to ourselves that we're teaching our children to be gentle and decent and all the rest of it by having less discipline, by making less demands of them. And yet, look what happens. Look what has happened to our society.
Okay.
I think we've got it entirely the wrong way round. People were far better to each other when we treated children as children, not as sort of putative adults that ran the room.
Gawain, thank you very much indeed. A lot of common sense in that. That's Gawain Tyler there, former spokesman for Reform UK. What do you think about what he said there, particularly when it comes to the Be Kind mob? 0344 499 1000. Thank you to this person who's texted in to say, every day I listen to talk, and every day it's the same narrative about stopping migrants, and governments giving this narrative about proactively doing things to counter the asylum issue. I'm absolutely tired of this. Governments do not want to change this. They absolutely do not want to stop the boats or make any change against the tide of this. It's a willing destruction of this nation. Wake up. People, this is deliberate. They could change this, and that is the truth, says that texter. Steve says, another 5 years of immigration the way it is now will finish the country for good. Well done, Mr. Blair. Your dream is nearly complete. Dave in London says, hi, Peter. On Migrant Street, I'm not sure if you remember, but the Treasury put out a press release about a year ago stating there were going to be 1.5 million new homes being built. That's exactly right. That's a Labour manifesto commitment, Dave. But many would be the new migrants coming to this country. Well, we can't even keep up with the number of migrants coming to this country if we build 1.5 million new homes, because there are loads of people here already who are effectively homeless. They have a roof over their head, but they don't have a permanent place to call home. And I'm not just talking about renters. I'm not talking about renters. Obviously, renters do have, to a degree, a permanent place to call home. Good evening, Peter, says Brian. Regarding Andy Burden, rather than Burnham's, plans giving power to local communities, what about if this village in Stoke Heath refuses to accept these individuals? There go whose diversity plans up in smoke. Yeah, exactly. I mean, people talk about local power and powers to do local things. Is this actually going to be something that they are able to do or unable to do? Dawn in Chelmsford says many people won't report antisocial behaviour because in order to get a successful prosecution, they may have to give evidence in court. This could lead to reprisals. Thanks to everybody who sent your messages in. Keep them coming. We'll go to the phones next. Mick and Debbie are going to tell us their thoughts, experiences, whatever it is you want to say. Give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. We'll get as many calls as we can on the air between now and 10 o'clock. You know what I do. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Trevor and Harrow, who says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Trevor. I'm so glad you brought up the subject of antisocial behaviour. We moved to the beautiful suburb town of Penna 26 years ago. It was so lovely. In the last few years, it's become unbearable. We're out of here. We're moving to Exeter. Once darkness hits, we literally have to lock ourselves in the house. We've even had some people throw themselves and try to kick the door in for absolutely no reason a few weeks ago. It's terrifying, and the police don't want to know. Well, Trevor, I'm very sorry to hear that. And I mean, just dreadful. So many people are dealing with this. We're going to hear from Mick in just a second on his experience. Jackie says sticking plaster politics on asylum or borders are like using a sieve to stop the sea. Why won't they declare a national emergency? Follow the money, that's why. And Bella the Boxer says, thank you for mentioning armed forces housing. Well, you know, I don't have a military background, but I know that so many different people from military families, all services, either veterans who have served our country or people in those families, they watch and listen to this programme, and that's why we always try to cover those issues. And one of the things that came out of this today, as I was saying a bit earlier on, the defence investment plan, was the fact that military homes are just not going to have as much money. This is coming at the same time as the fact that we're hearing about 83 asylum seekers who are going to get £250,000 homes in £250,000 homes in this area in Migrant Street. It's been called Stoke Heath in Shropshire. A very interesting caller on this, Debbie in Birmingham, has given me a ring. Debbie, you're a veteran yourself.
I am a veteran. Hello, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
So tell me your story in regard to this.
So David and I, we were posted from Aldershot to, well, David was posted to Grove Park. But
so your husband's in the military as well, David, yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. We were giving a quarter in Biggin Hill, but it was at the time where the military or the MOD decided to start changing contracts. So he was given something called FTRS, and they said, you can leave your quarter in Aldershot, and we will repost you and put you in a quarter in Biggin Hill, which was great. So we moved in 2013. As soon as we set foot into that quarter, within 30 days, we had a notice to move. And so we were given 93 days notice.
So you were moved from Aldershot to Biggin Hill, to a quarter of the home, basically, and you were told, right, move there, and then you were told you had to go.
Correct.
Why was that?
Because they said my parents lived inside the M25, and due to the way they were changing the contracts of army, like officers or soldiers, therefore they could do that. And when we fought it, we went through our local council, who then threw us up to Joe Johnson, who was our local MP at the time. He tried to fight it for 18 months, and he basically gave up and told us he couldn't help us any further.
So you're serving your country, your husband's still in the army, and you were being given this place to stay, and then you were told you moved everything, you moved to Biggin Hill, and then within 30 days you were told you had to move out. And what did they need the accommodation for?
They told us it was because they had migrants and other people on that sort of level that needed the accommodation more than we did. And when we argued that, they were like, but your parents live in Ashford, so within inside the M25, and David could commute. And to get from West London, I lived at Junction 13 on the M25, to try and get round that side of the M25 would have taken David.
Also, it's just the principle of things. I mean, I'm sure your parents are lovely people, but most adults don't want to live with their in-laws or with their parents. They want to have their own place. And it is perfectly reasonable for two serving officers who happen to be married to one another to say, well, give us a home. That's what the military's meant to do. But instead, you were told, actually, get out of this place we've told you to move to because we need it for asylum seekers.
Exactly. And then because we had friends still on the estate, we went back about 8 years later, and our house, which was 10 Grice Avenue, I don't care if I tell you that, was still empty.
That's crazy.
But the thing is, I mean, we were only paying, was it £260 a month, which was, ridiculous for a house at that sort of part of London, but you do get subsidised.
Yes.
But
as you should. I mean, military salaries are famously not brilliant. So I think a bit of subsidised housing when you're serving your country is absolutely fine.
But the thing is, would you not rather just take the money from someone it came direct from David's wages? So it's not like we had to go and pay it to a rent office.
Yes.
It gets taken at source, and they left the place empty.
That's crazy. I mean, when you hear of the fact that we've got the Defence Investment Plan today, which is a long and complex document, but it's not nearly the amount of money that many people say the military needs. You're a military family. I know David's still in the military. You're in a situation where money has been taken away from military housing. What do you think of that, Debbie?
I think it's wrong. It's completely wrong. And when we tried to stay in the area, because we like to live I'm in Londoner, so we like to live in the area we're in, but trying to find somewhere to rent was extortionate, considering what we were used to. But no one would touch us with our animals, and we've got 2 dogs and we had 2 cats. So my dad, who said that he would leave his house in a wooden box, said, right, I'll sell up, and we bought up here. So now we live in Lincolnshire.
Goodness
and we've
me.
now this mad house where it's 2 separate dwellings, but we meet in the middle if we want to use the kitchen. But that's how we survive, because the military just turned their back on us.
I mean, in terms of our viewers and listeners, there are people, the system, okay, no matter what the Home Office says at the moment about, this can never happen again with this migrant street in Shropshire, Stoke Heath, this development. I mean, you've got 83 asylum seekers who have given nothing to this country. They may well be genuine asylum seekers. They may well need somewhere to stay, and that's fine. But do they need to be moved into £250,000 properties? You've got you and your husband who have served this country for a very long time being told to, actually, we don't have room for you. I mean, many people will find that absolutely astonishing, Debbie.
But that's exactly what they did do to us. Exactly what they did do to us.
So when you see these homes, these brand spanking new homes, £250,000 homes in Stoke Heath, 21 smart new homes earmarked for asylum seekers, what do you think, Debbie?
I think it's disgusting, because you've got veterans. I know a lot of people say veterans, they need housing. There's a lot of veterans, because we go back to mental health, that just don't feel right in bricks and mortar. But you've got veterans that do need it. You've got families leaving the military that maybe have not been able to get on the property ladder. You've got families out there on benefits for whatever reason, or got children or whatever that are, not in a good place, that need housing. And for some reason, these migrants are getting put before the rest of us. It's mad.
Debbie, thanks for your call. I mean, just illustrates an absolutely mad point of priorities in this country. Mick's in Bromley and has some thoughts on antisocial behaviour. Tell us what happened to you, Mick.
Hi, I'm just turning 60 years old. Where I live in Sidcup, which is not far from Biggin Hill, where the lady was just talking about.
Yeah, I'm very, very familiar with Sidcup, actually. I know where that is, yeah.
There's a place there called Black Fen. It's got a lovely little grass, like a little country thing with little shops going around it and all the rest. It's lovely. And I was walking my dog around there, and I got attacked by about 12 to 15 kids from 14 to 15 years old.
I'm really sorry to hear that, Mick. That's grim, horrible.
Every single night they go down the road on there. It's like a bars there and restaurants. Everyone eats outside. It's beautiful. And they come along there and they're doing at least 20 mile an hour on these electric bikes along there. People are jumping out the way for their lives. Sooner or later, someone's going to be killed there. It's a guarantee. Anyways, I was walking along there. One of these bikes nearly ran me over. I shouted at him. The next thing I know, I get punched in the face by one of these kids.
So you're saying, watch yourself there, or can you just stop going so fast, something like that?
Yeah, I just shouted at him, for God's sake, or something. It was just like that, what I mean? And then the next thing I know, I got all of them jumped on me and start hammering me. And lucky there's like a Turkish hairdressers there, and they all come running out and helped me out. So I pulled all these kids off. And
they just sound like feral youths out of control.
Yeah, every single. Well, eventually, it's like every night they're throwing eggs and rocks at cars and all sorts. This is every night. The police. I ring the police, or someone in one of the shops. Sorry, rang the police, because it's all on video as well. This whole incident. No police turned up after about 20 minutes. Our local police, so they had to call in the police from miles away, which is Woolwich, which is like a long way from us. And they eventually turned up. But the first thing the copper says is, "This happens here every single night. This does." And I said to him, "Why didn't you sort it out then? You know what's going on."
Yes.
I could take you round in a car and I could pick up every single kid round here who causes all the trouble. Every single one of them.
You know who they are.
Yeah, I know they are. I've seen them every night because I go down there, walk the dog around there. I know there's all the trouble because there's like a little micro bar there where we all sit and everyone chats and they point all these kids out that causing the regular trouble, throwing rocks at people and attacking people and everything. And the police do absolutely nothing. You never see them around. You think they patrol around there once in a while. They're never there, never.
Where are the parents, Mick?
This is the point. Parents do nothing. I've never seen any parents around there for these kids. You know what I mean? I'm calling them over. It's always the same group there, and it's getting more and more of them there causing trouble. And the police do absolutely nothing. Absolutely. The police are an absolutely waste of time. This country is now in anarchy. I mean, this is, and I can tell you now, when I go out now, I'm always carrying. I never go without anything now. This is like 4 or 5 weeks ago, and I'm not going to trust it now. If they want to do it again...
You're always carrying what, Mick? You're always carrying what?
Well, that's between me and myself, what I'm carrying. But I can tell you, if I get done again, I'll end up in the big house.
Well,
because I'm not going to have it
Mick,
anymore.
I just have to be absolutely clear that, you know, it's illegal to carry a weapon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I'd rather get judged by 12 than carried by 6, mate. I can tell you, and that's the way it's got now. Because the same place, the police do nothing. I mean, I drive a motorbike a little while ago. I've got it all on video, going along the road in the same place. 2 Arabic guys hit me in a Range Rover from behind, smashed me across the road at 60 mile an hour, smashed the hell out of my bike. I broke my ribs. I was in a right state. The police will come running out of the house, called the police, and you know what the police did? They said to him, tell him to fill out a form online. They couldn't even be asked to come out and see me.
It just sounds so incredibly frustrating. Listen, thank you for that, Mick, and we just want to be absolutely clear that we do not condone carrying weapons or anything similar. Now, Mick didn't say what he was carrying, but he said he was carrying something, and we do not condone that at all, and I cannot advocate ever carrying a weapon or anything at all that is unlicensed and illegal. So, but clearly Mick feels he has to. We can hear the frustration that's through there. I hope that nobody is encouraged to do the same as him. I must say I understand his frustration. I'm not advocating what he's doing there at all, not for a second, and I'm being absolutely clear about that. But we're going to speak to Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector, in just a second about this scourge of low-level crime. It's not low-level to people like Mick. It's very high-level. It's his day and daily. He's dealing with this, as are so many others. Maybe you're one of them. Oh, tell us your experience. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Stevie, who's been in touch on Twitter, who says, just watch illegal entrants being arrested for trying to leave the UK. Consider that the French authorities escort them to our border farce, who ferry them the rest of the way here. How in the name of sanity do they stop people leaving? Well, that's just another issue. And actually, it's a big day politically, of course, because we have Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, talking about defence and defence of the realm and how we get all the money we need to defence and to drones and all the rest of it. But one thing that so many people are ringing us about, and that was an extraordinary call from Mick there, actually talking about the fact that, and I just want to be absolutely clear, I do not condone this at all. I'm not advocating for a second that anybody carries a weapon. I don't want people to do that. He feels he has to. I don't think he should. but this is the world that Mick is living in, you know, a pretty nice part of the world. Sidcup is, I'm pretty familiar with it because my old boss when I was in government was the MP for Old Bexley in Sidcup. Sidcup's a nice place. Sidcup's like commuter belt. Sidcup's like Kent, London borders. A lot of people spend a lot of, you know, work hard, buy houses there, commute into London a lot of the time or other places to go and work. It's a pleasant place, but it's not pleasant when there are 14 and 15-year-old scumbags who come and beat you up, as Mick experienced, and he is clearly fearful and clearly worrying about his safety around there. Lots on this, and please do get in touch and let me know your experience and just your thoughts on it in general. I was chatting to someone the other day, actually, and I was saying that what I've sort of done when the heat recently is opened my front door and kept it propped open. I keep an eye on it. I'm sitting in the living room. I can see it. I'm making sure nobody's coming in and, you know, stealing anything or anything like that. I live on the ground floor. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine who just said, I couldn't do that. Where I live, I wouldn't open the front door. I just wouldn't feel safe. And I thought how lucky I am to not feel that. Maybe I should feel that. Mike Neville is retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Mike, thanks for joining us on the programme. I mean, some of the statistics around this, we've heard the very personal experience of Mick. Lots more people are getting in touch, and if you want to do so, please give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. But we're in a situation where this survey telling us that 1 in 7 households have considered leaving their area. 6% of people have actually had antisocial behaviour driving them out of their homes. A quarter of people, more than a quarter, 28%, saying antisocial behaviour making people feel unsafe in their area, and nearly 2/3 who experienced antisocial behaviour in the past 3 years did not report it. We heard from Mick there, who was telling us about being set upon by a bunch of teenage feral scumbags, and he said the police did nothing about it. What's your view on this, Mike?
Well, what we need is some action. You know, the government have said, the Victims Commissioner said today, oh, you know, this new law was passed last year, the Victim and Prisoners Act, which gives, you know, sort of credibility to this Victims Charter where the victims are supposed to be told what's going on. But we don't need any more laws, Peter. We just need the police to deal with things, the local bobby to get a grip before things go too far. Because we know the previous Victim Commissioner, of course, Baroness Newlove, who died, her husband was murdered by youths who smashed up her car. And then you had the dreadful case in Leicestershire of Fiona Pilkington, who was driven to commit suicide and killed her disabled daughter because they'd been driven to it by these wicked attacks.
I remember the case of Fiona Pilkington very, very well. It was a horrible, awful case. She was bullied and terrorised by local youths, but she rang the police time and time and time again and talked about the fact that she and Leicestershire and her daughter were being terrorised by these people, and the police didn't do nearly as much as they should have.
They didn't, and things have just got worse and worse. I mean, we know, for example, you know, the police are only solving 5% of burglaries, 1% of thefts. And so if they're not targeting those crimes, you know, when it comes to seemingly minor things, you know, somebody throwing stones, banging on doors, then they're not going to do anything. But the facts are these little things build up to big things. It's this broken windows scenario. And people's lives, communities are made a misery because these youngsters are out of control. And the local bobby on the beat, you know, I was that officer, you know, I patrolled around the area around the Oval in South London, and I got a grip of these things. And I also ran a local youth organisation to divert these kids from things. So these are not complicated things to do, but what it needs is an officer on the street getting a grip of these minor things before they get out of hand.
So how does the government and how do the police services need to redirect their efforts? Because we talk about non-crime hate incidents. We know so much crime is online these days, but in terms of actually seeing police officers on the beat, so many people don't. I see them from time to time around the station, which is very close to where we are here. I saw one officer once in my local area where I live in London, and that's once in the last 5.5 years that I saw him. He was going into a shop to buy some food. And so many people just don't feel the police are actually there. In terms of actually being on the beat, bobbies on the beat, discouraging people, do you think that works?
I do think it works. I was that officer. It does work. And if we stopped officers doing non-crime hate incidents, if they stopped doing those and got out on the street, I used to ride around on a mountain bike. So I was highly visible. I could be in, very fast in different places on my beat. Every beat in London had its own dedicated officer. These are simple things that have worked for a long time, and we try and move away from them and things go badly wrong. So let's get the police refocused on what they should be doing, which is preventing and detecting crime, real stuff that impacts on communities, rather than recording nonsense that no one really is interested in.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting point. I mean, do you think that the elites in this country, the government, actually understand this? Because they're not throwing eggs at their door. They're not beating people up there. They're not, you know, there's so many people who are insulated from this because they live in you know, very posh areas. We know that a lot of MPs do face abuse. I'm not minimising that for a second. Nigel Farage, for example, has been targeted by this horrible graffiti this evening. But do you think that, or that has been reported today anyway, do you think that the senior echelon of the police actually understand what people want out of policing?
I really don't know. They're focusing on all the wrong things, and the politicians are focusing on the wrong things. But like you say, what criminals can see, what these teenagers can see, teenagers cause much of this antisocial behaviour misery, is that they know there's no consequences. They know that the older ones who are dealing drugs are not arrested. The people who go thieving are not arrested for shoplifting. The people who commit burglaries are very unlikely to go to jail. So what they see is a society where you can misbehave, you can cause misery in your community, and there are no consequences to that.
And that's it. And that attitude is going to be entrenched. And I just, you know, how we treat our young people is how they're going to act in the next generation. Those people are going to grow up and not respect authority. They're not going to be deterred from doing whatever the hell they want, whenever the hell they want. There'll be adults with more agency, more money, more power to do these things. And that is a generational thing, isn't it, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. They see their family, their father, their grandfather have done all these things, and they carry on doing and there's less and less consequences than there was 10, 20 years ago. People know that, you know, the government have got rid of 1 year prison sentences. Well, for sort of minor antisocial behaviour and stuff, you're never going to go to prison for more than 1 year. So they know that there's no consequence.
And they want to abolish short sentences. Mike, listen, thank you for that. That's Mike Neville there, who's former Detective Chief Inspector in the Metropolitan Police. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. 0344 499 1000. Neil has been in touch and says, Cardi P, listening to your last caller who was attacked by a bunch of kids in Sidcup, I think we need to know, are they local kids or migrants? Paul says, sorry to say this, but if I saw a police officer in trouble, I'm afraid I would turn around and walk away. Why should I put myself in danger and end up probably being charged for something? Gary says, I live in Bexley Heath, and your previous caller is spot on. Bexley Heath is pretty close to Sidcup. My local town centre has had to start hiring security guards 7 days a week, now following a teen being stabbed last summer on his way home from school. I've lived in the Bexley borough for 35 years. It was never like this before. Britain has fallen. The governments are responsible for Britain having fallen so badly. How do we get here where it is totally lawless, says Gary. From the Midlands, Chris has given us a ring from Derbyshire. He's been on the receiving end of antisocial behaviour as well. Chris, tell us what's happened to you. You're very welcome to the programme.
Well, I've been the victim of multiple incidents of antisocial behaviour, most of it based around hate crime and religious and ethnic reasons as a result of my religion. So basically graffiti.
We've spoken before, Chris, haven't we? You're Jewish, aren't you?
Yeah, right all the way up to the harassment.
Yes.
By those three individuals.
I'm so sorry to hear that, Chris. And do the police do anything about it? Do you feel you're taken seriously?
Listen, they do the best they can with the resources they've got. You know, at the end of the day, it's a tough job, and they're doing what they can with the resources they've got, which is very few in my opinion from what I see. And it's got to the point where now I'm thinking of taking up self-defence classes just so that I can feel confident when going down my street. This is where we're at now.
That's horrendous, Chris. And, you know, there are people taking even more radical action than that. I hope they don't. But, Chris, I mean, you need to feel safe in your own home. You need to feel that where you live is safe. Home is meant to be a sanctuary. It's not meant to be somewhere where you feel afraid. But you're feeling afraid, and so many people are feeling afraid. You're one of a large group of people who don't have the peace that so many people have in their homes when they say, right, close the door, sit down on the sofa, just a bit of peace, can have a bit of food or watch a bit of telly and not worry. But you are worrying, Chris, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. Because it's this sort of drip, drip, drip effect of first it's the graffiti, then what? They confront me, then what? And you're always wondering, like, when is it going to get to the point where, God forbid, either me or somebody else who's a victim of these thugs gets punched in the face or worse? At what point is somebody going to call a stop to this? Because from what I can see, the people who do this seem to just get away with it every time, and it's me who's having to move away. It's me who's having to, have the council try and find a new place for me. And it's me who's having to make all the big changes to my life. It shouldn't
and that's
be the
totally
victim
unfair.
having to make the change.
Totally unfair.
It should be the perpetrators having to make the change. They should be the ones getting removed out of council housing if they're a tenant. If they're not a tenant, there should be other punitive measures to disencourage this.
I can hear how upset you are in your voice, Chris.
Not just upset, angry.
Yeah.
Because, I thought that this was going to be the place that I would, that I'd stay. I never thought religion or race would be an issue to the point where I would now be having to consider, A, moving, and B, particularly after the incident where I was threatened, now I'm thinking about taking up self-defense.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I never thought that in a place where I have lived for over 30 years that I would have to be thinking of taking this kind of action.
Chris, I feel so sorry for you. I really just feel, I don't know what to say, to be brutally honest. Just thank you for sharing your experience with us. I just hope things get better. I really do. And I know so many people will be listening and watching to this and feeling exactly the same way as I am, which is disgusted and very sad and really feeling for you at this moment. And I just wish you all the very, very best. Chris, and please keep us updated on what happens. I hope things get better. There's a bit of breaking news, and that is that a patient at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow is being tested for a suspected case of Ebola. We'll give you more detail on that, and we'll talk about the BBC and whether it should be more ethnically diverse. That's what the Archbishop of York says. One of my favourite guests, man who speaks such common sense, Ike EJ, is coming up in a second. We don't get him often, and when we do, it's a rare treat. You're going to want to hear what he has to say. And keep your calls coming in about all the things that Chris was saying, Debbie, all our Mike Neville, all the different callers and contributors, whatever you want to say. Plenty of time for calls between now and 10 o'clock. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, the Archbishop of York is a man called the Most Reverend Stephen Cottrell. He says that for too long, representation has meant presenters with a regional accent on the BBC, and says the BBC should focus more on ethnic diversity. We looked up how many ethnic minority employees are in the BBC, and it's around the national average of the number of ethnic minority people in this country. It's about 18%, according to the recent census and according to BBC data. So the point is, if they're being represented in roughly the numbers that are there already in the country, what's the problem? You also have the Most Reverend Stephen Cottrell, who is giving this speech. He is quite literally a white man who replaced a black man as Archbishop of York. So there we are. Ike Ije is an architect. He's also a signatory to the Don't Divide Us. He's a founding signatory of that excellent organisation. Ike is with us now. How are you doing? Good to see you.
I'm fine, Peter. How are you?
Very well, thank you. What do you make of the Most Reverend Stephen Cottrell, Ike?
Well, these things kind of oscillates between being depressing and annoying, really, to be honest. I just don't understand where we've got to the place where we're at. Now, to start off, I mean, the Church of England, it's a Christian church. The central doctrine of one of the central doctrines of the Christian church is to treat, we're all born equally. All men, all women, we're all equal. And here we have, I think, the second most senior cleric within the Church of England urging the state broadcaster to treat people unequally and treat them differently on the basis of their skin color. Now, where I come from, and when I was born and taught and grown up, treating people differently as a result of their skin color is called racism. I don't care how you dress it up, whether you say it's diversity or progressivism. This poison of treating people differently has to stop. And I find it profoundly depressing that it's coming from, of all places, the Church of England.
The thing that annoys me as well is that when you divide people by race, you essentially tell people they're victims to a degree. They say, well, you're victims of oppressive colonialism, you're victims of this, that, and the other. And that, I mean, I want people to do well, I want people to be positive, I want people to reach their potential. Whereas if you always have this kind of excuse all the time that, oh, I'm a victim, if things go wrong, it's not my fault, it just feeds into that. And I wonder if that's part of this as well.
Well, of course it is. It feeds into this cult of victimhood which we have, which in many ways is a new religion. And there's so many kind of different institutions who crave the idea of victimhood so they can come in and be the saviors. But as well as victimhood, it's also deeply insulting because it implies that ethnic minorities cannot get along, they cannot succeed unless white people are artificially pushed out of the way. It's deeply insulting. It's basically saying that we can't do it on the basis of our own talent, of our own skill. The market has to be kind of externally manipulated because we're so silly and we're so thick that we can't kind of succeed by ourselves. It's just really reductive. Look, I know racism exists. I'm not naive. Of course it exists. But look at Britain today. We're a long, long, long way from where we may have been decades ago. We're one of the most least racist countries in the world. And to say an institution like the BBC, which you just mentioned, has a fairly representative proportion of ethnic minority staff or employees compared to the national average, to say an institution like that needs extra manipulation, massaging of its kind of demographics to make it to appeal to some kind of diversity ideal, it's just ridiculous. It's insulting, it's reductive, and I'm sorry, it's racist as well.
I wonder as well, I mean, I worked for the BBC for 3 years, and I can tell you right now that there is a higher, if you take the statistics in regard to gay people in this country, it's probably something like 5%. There were a heck of a lot more than 5% of the people who worked for the BBC who were openly gay. Absolutely no doubt about that. I'm not saying that's a good thing, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I'm simply saying that was my experience and that's what I found out. On this basis, would Stephen Cottrell argue that gay people should be fired because there are too many of them in the BBC? That's what I want to know.
Well, if you take his stance to its logical conclusion, of course he would argue that they should be fired. But obviously he's never going to argue that because it's not about that. It's not about representation. It's about appealing to this kind of notion of what diversity means. And it's a notion which, at its fundamental moral basis, is based on the idea of exclusion. And excluding who? Excluding, unfortunately, white people. That's what it boils down to. If you say one person has to succeed, one person has to be pushed down as a result of that. And that's what it's based on. So it's deeply divisive, and I don't think a Christian church should be going anywhere near this kind of methodology or ideology.
Are Christian churches and other religions as well, are they too eager to lean into so-called politically correct issues in your view?
Well, I suppose I can only speak for, not that my religion is relevant or anyone's religion is relevant here. I can speak for maybe my own Christian faith. I'm not an Anglican, I am a Catholic, but I do believe the Anglican Church, it's easy for me to criticize from the sidelines, I think it has strayed from what should be its central doctrine, the Word of God, the Christian theology. It shouldn't be dealing with things like slavery reparations, diversity on the BBC. This is a distraction from what the Church of England is there for. And if you also look, I think this story would be awful. It'd be morally perverse at any time. But let's look at this country at the moment. I think the country is crying out for moral leadership. We've just had a vote, abortion has just been decriminalised. Britain has the highest level of abortions in Europe, other than Russia. An assisted dying bill is about to come back into Parliament. Youth knife crime is increasing. The role of the family is continually being usurped and undermined. Extremism, anti-Semitism, sectarianism, they're all rising. And rape gangs, the most appalling moral collapse I've seen in my lifetime. I think in probably modern British social history has happened. Where is the church on these issues? These are the fundamental moral issues the church should be speaking about, but it's silent. And instead, it's playing diversity bingo with the amount of people, ethnic minorities, who are on the BBC. So I think the worst thing about this is it's a complete abdication of the church's moral responsibility to provide leadership and to comment and to be a voice on all the string of issues I've mentioned, which are wrong with Britain today.
Ike, thank you as always. Ike EJ there, who is a signatory of the Don't Divide Us organisation. He's also an architect, and I just cannot disagree with a single word he has said there. Just a little bit more on the Ebola. You'll probably hear more on this in the news in just a second as well. A patient at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow being treated for a suspected case of Ebola. The World Health Organisation has declared the disease outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. Public Health Scotland has said there are currently no confirmed cases of Ebola in Scotland. The risk to the general public is low, but they're working closely with the Health Security Agency to assess relevant routes. Lots more on this. We'll talk about defence too. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Tuesday evening. There's so much to talk about. Antisocial behaviour is something you want to talk about. And as always on my programmes, if you want to talk about it, we will talk about it because it's my show, but it's your show too. So pick up the phone. Let me know your thoughts on antisocial behaviour. What's happened to you? What you want the police to do about it? What you want the government to do about it? Do they get it? Is Andy Burnham someone who can actually get a grip on this stuff, especially when 6% of people, 1 in 20 people, have actually moved home because of what antisocial behaviour has done to their area? The big political story today is the Defence Investment Plan. We finally got it after 11 months of wrangling, political rows, a Defence Secretary and Armed Forces Minister resigning, a Prime Minister resigning, largely to do with that. We'll get the expert view of Simon Diggins on that too. Colonel Simon Diggins, my favourite defence analyst. Lots to discuss on all of this with you as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 72222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty of time for calls in this hour, especially 9 o'clock hours where we do more calls. So if you want to be one of them, give me a shout here on the Evening Exchange. Stay with us right through to 10 o'clock. Thank you to Gary. He says, we have homeless veterans who have put their lives on the line, protecting us now, living rough on the streets while this government houses migrants who have broken into this country to claim asylum in brand new homes. This is the story. Front page of The Sun today. Government's on a U-turn over it, sort of ish, of a brand new homes. 83 migrants will be housed in these £250,000 homes on Migrant Street. It is an absolute scandal, and the Home Office says it won't happen again, but they're not saying it won't happen this time. Gary continues, it's almost as if they are deliberately taunting us, hoping to provoke a violent reaction so they can use it as the excuse they're looking for to come down hard on the so-called far right, which in reality is mostly just decent people who've had enough of all this nonsense, says Gary. Jackie says, why don't we allow people to claim asylum only at a British embassy in their own country? This would enable more thorough investigation of their claims and the ability to check their criminal history. This would stop the boats, as they wouldn't be considered for asylum using that route, and ensure they're safe to enter the country, says Jackie. Lots on antisocial behaviour. Many people getting in touch about that. And Joe in Willerby in East Yorkshire says, I've just caught the end of your call with that poor Jewish gentleman. That was Chris in Derbyshire there about half an hour ago, but I didn't catch his name. Chris in Derbyshire is his name. Joe is a really nice guy. I was so very sorry to hear and sad to hear of the abuse and intimidation he's had to endure purely because he's Jewish. The perpetrators should hang their heads in shame and feel the full force of the law. Perhaps Andy Burnham could tell us what his plans are to rid the country of anti-Semitism. Please send him my very kindest regards and let him know that the Talk family will be thinking of him and wishing him all the very best. Joe, what a lovely message, and I know Chris will be watching and listening right now and will hear that, so thank you for that. And final one before we go to our next guest, Catherine in Cardiff, who says, what a fantastic speaker you had on there, and Ike EJ. It's Ike EJ is his name. Catherine was asking his name. He is just superb. I'd love to have him on the programme a lot more. He can't do it too often, but Ike, it just speaks total common sense. He is a great guy. He's a friend of mine as well, actually, and he is just superb. Let's talk about defence now and hear what the Prime Minister has been saying about investment. This is the Prime Minister in a speech this morning. We've heard from so many different people in the defence establishment. We'll hear the expert view of Simon Diggins in a second, but first the Prime Minister.
I can also confirm that we are bringing our investment in renewing our nuclear deterrent to £64 billion, a truly national effort, building new submarines, developing a new sovereign warhead, and buying 12 F-35A fighter jets, maintaining our role in guaranteeing British and European security, and leaving our country in a much better and stronger place than we found it.
That's the Prime Minister speaking in a speech earlier. He also said that sacrifices had to be made to find the money to fund the Defence Investment Plan.
Some capital projects, for example on roads and energy, which are important but not immediately vital, will no longer go ahead as planned. But this is about taking the necessary choices, the right choices, to protect our nation. It is because we've taken these hard-edged decisions that we are able to increase our spending on defence.
Well, you remember a few weeks ago, John Healey resigned as Defence Secretary because the money simply wasn't there. He said the Defence Investment Plan that he had seen, we haven't seen it until today, wasn't fit for purpose. His successor, Dan Jarvis, says apparently it is. We'll hear what Simon Diggins says in a second, but just before we do, here's what John Healey, the former Defence Secretary, now on the back benches, said in Parliament today.
But threats are still growing. Demands on defence are still rising in this dangerous world, and today's step means that we will be spending as a nation 2.7% of GDP on defence in 2030, the date that NATO now warns we could face a Russian attack. So with European security at stake, would my right honourable friends agree that more needs to be done in the months ahead beyond the dip to develop a clear, credible funding plan that will hit 3% and that will meet our NATO commitment of 3.5% by 2035.
That is the former Defence Secretary, John Healey. He may well be agitating to be Chancellor under the new Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. If Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister, barring a miracle, he will be in 3 weeks' time. Colonel Simon Diggins is my favourite military and defence analyst and joins me now. Simon, what do you make of this? You're very welcome to the programme. What do you make of this defence investment plan? We have it here, and it's a long document. Will it be enough?
Peter, good evening to you. I think the short answer, as John Healey just explained, is no. But of course, I actually welcome the fact we've got one at all. It's been nearly a year since we've had the review in 2025, and for all that time we've been promised a defence investment plan. Important so the armed forces know what they're going to get, but also important because defence industry knows the money's going to come their way and they can start building, creating infrastructure and everything that goes with it. And that was also missing from this. The other bits I also welcome in the plan is the reorientation, though that's coming at a bit of a cost, towards some of the capabilities that we now know we need as a result of the war, particularly in Ukraine, but also in the Middle East. And I think that's the single thing that Dan Jarvis has been able to do, is to kind of reorient the money away from legacy systems, as I described before, towards meeting some of our requirements for the new warfare. So I think that's also
so that's moving away from the old ideas of tanks and large ships and moving towards things like drones.
Yeah, yes, I mean, we're going to continue to need warships and we're going to continue to need armoured vehicles. But the question is the balance between them. And the Chief Defence Review was quite clear about it. I mean, it talked about manned aircraft, it talked about autonomous vehicles, and it talked about sort of effectively vehicles that could operate by themselves. So they could do all of those things, or could be tied to it. The question is the right balance between them. And I fear that the original plans, when the chief talked about the 28 billion they needed, was very much about the legacy equipment. Now, what I'm still not sure about, not clear about, is what the sacrifices have been required in order to make that. We know there's now an extra £1 billion in that budget from the original 14.5 billion that was there. But I understand that some of the things that might have been done in the room to make that space could also require some compromises within defence. We're talking about, for example, not refurbishing the married quarters for our personnel. We're also talking, for example, about not enhancing and recruiting more cadets, both of which are kind of long-term and important. The married quarter one is essential because of morale, and morale is not good necessarily in the armed forces at the moment.
What do you think that Lord Robertson will think about this? George Robertson was the former Defence Secretary. He was the Secretary General of NATO, and he was one of the 3 people who 11 months ago put together this plan, essentially, and said this is what we need. We need 3% of what the country makes, GDP, to be spent on defence. We're not getting that. We're getting 2.7%. That's billions and billions of pounds worth of a difference. So what do you think the original people, including Lord Robertson, will think of this?
I think they'll do what most people would do. They're going to rate it a kind of C+. It's a pass. We're going there. We're starting to move on from it. But I think I had listened to General Sir Richard Barron's earlier on today, and he just he kept re-emphasising the same points. The threat is absolutely real. And don't listen to people like myself. Listen to the prime ministers of Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania.
Well, I mean, that's
Poland.
really interesting you mentioned that, Simon, because I was speaking to a guest earlier on, a former government minister, actually, Bill Rammell, a former armed services minister, actually. He was saying that, and another guest as well on the debate desk, saying that often we don't hear that from our own Prime Minister. We don't hear about the threat. We don't hear about Iran in our streets. We don't hear about Putin's cyber warfare. We don't hear about Chinese influence. It's something that we cover in this programme as often as we can. But in terms of the actual threat to this country, do you think the man and woman in the street actually gets it? And surely it's up to political leaders to educate people about that and show some leadership.
I think that's absolutely right, Peter, because it is sometimes a bit abstruse, but one of your colleagues said to me, 3 or 4 months ago, said, we're already at war. And this was a journalist, not a defence analyst, who was saying that. And they were instancing things like the cyber attacks. We've seen things like the Russian submarines sitting over the top of our undersea cables. We've seen, for goodness sake, we've seen drones over Dublin Airport. I mean, that's the nature of the threat we are up against at the moment. Continual pushing, continual checking our boundaries, see what they can get away with, and occasionally that explodes into something like warehouse fires, like assassination attempts, and what the former director of MI5 described as Russian military intelligence running feral all over Europe. That's kind of what we're at the moment. Cleverly, of course, that keeps it just below the threshold. And I think we've prepared our population to think about war in kind of Second World War times, almost with kind of declarations of war and fighting. Actually, what Putin's doing is just keeping the boil going all the way through. And at some point, he may choose to push one stage further, as he did in Ukraine. He may go for the Baltics. He may even go for something like Kazakhstan, so which we're not even thinking about, but actually is there because it means he can expand his empire and push forward his vision of what Russia should be as a kind of great power. And we need to be able to respond to that.
It's interesting with Ukraine because, of course, within the war, which has lasted longer than the First World War, actually, we've had a situation where only a fifth of that territory has been actually taken by Russia. Do we really need to worry about those other threats, about them invading Kazakhstan and so on? Does Russia really have the military might to do that, Simon?
I think it does. I mean, what it's still got, what it can't do is necessarily sustain it against a sort of an enemy that's managed to get its act together in time. And that's the real challenge: is can we get our act together in time to do something about it? And that is a matter of timing it against the threat timelines that we've got. And we've been very slow to kind of catch up, which is why I think one of the things that the Prime Minister will be able to do is, by announcing this now, he can go and perhaps hold his head up a little bit higher at the NATO summit, because other NATO leaders were pointing to exactly the same threat analysis we're showing, and then looking at UK and finding we're 31 out of 32 nations in NATO in terms of our defence spending. I mean, that's the reality of life. And that's where the kind of catch-up comes from there. Putin is an opportunist, though, Peter. I mean, he will take opportunities there. If he sees weakness, he will push against that weakness. I think that's our challenge. We've had so many years of effectively taking a holiday in terms of generalised defence spending that it's now very hard for us to try and catch up in time.
Just finally, speaking about defence spending and where the money comes from, I'm not asking you to be party political, Simon, but when it comes to Andy Burnham, in 3 weeks' time, he may be the next Prime Minister. It's almost certain to happen. We're in a situation where one of the very first things he's going to have to do is find 4.7 billion quid to actually go along with these plans, if he in fact does that, which would be very, very difficult for him not to do. Is that a concern?
I think so. I mean, he's I think being high on sort of emotional talk, and I fear Macclesfield is about to turn into the modern day version of the famous grocer's shop in Grantham as a kind of the touchstone against which all things are.
He's dead northern, isn't he?
Exactly, are measured. And I think the other challenge he's got is, I could agree with a lot of what he said about localism, but a lot of the challenges we've got as a country are national challenges, and defence will always be a national issue, and finding the money for defence will always be a national requirement. So, in a sense, whatever he'd like to do with the country, and some which you can understand, some which you can agree with, some you can disagree with, these issues, these national issues, will be right on the top of his agenda. And I think he may find that extremely uncomfortable.
Simon, thank you. Simon Diggins there, Colonel Simon Diggins, former senior military officer, of course, military and defence analyst. Really interesting speaking to him. Always good to hear his analysis. Let me know what you think of it. 0344 499 1000. Robert's been in touch with a voice note on antisocial behaviour.
The whole country's falling apart, you know, absolutely in a terrible mess. Unsocial behaviour, people feeling unsafe in their homes, the police utterly useless and incompetent. Where I live in North London, we've had terrible problems of antisocial behaviour, with gangs of kids running amok, racing motorbikes up and down the road all night till they're quite late. And I'm just scared because if I look at them the wrong way, you know, I could get a knife in me. Police not interested. Fill a form out online. They came round and they put some posters up saying antisocial behaviour will not be tolerated, blah blah, nothing done about it. You never see a policeman or a woman, you know, walking around. You never see anyone. It's absolutely out of control.
Robert, that's grim. I'm really sorry to hear that that is happening. And unfortunately, that appears to be the case for just so many people. There are so many people contacting us this evening, telling us their stories. We're going to hear more in just a second. And if you are one of those people, there's plenty of time for calls between now and 10 o'clock. So please do give us a ring. Robert's clearly having a miserable time. And if the problem is, we hear this all the time. We hear from the Prime Minister, oh, there's no place for antisocial behaviour. Well, there is. There is a place. There's a place. It's called the UK. There's no place for anti-Semitism. There's no place for racism. Well, I'm afraid there is, because people are doing those three things. Those three things are happening right now. And you can say, oh, well, there's no place for it. There absolutely is. And until the authorities do something about Robert's story, do something about Chris and Derbyshire's story, do something about these issues that we've been hearing about for the last 2.5 hours, well, nothing is going to get better. Robert's not going to have a better life. Chris isn't going to have a better life. And we look to our... you know, the authorities, the ones we pay for, we're paying tax through the nose in this country. What are they actually doing about it? Well, tell me what you think. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch, including Alex in Cardiff, who says, IGJ, we heard from him just before 9 o'clock on the Archbishop talking about the BBC. Ike speaks so much sense. Churches should not teach ideologies. Their one and only job is to teach what's said in the Bible, and hopefully people try their best to follow Christ's word and teachings. But I don't believe any religion should comment on political matters and DEI, says Alex. Ernie says the police can't do anything about antisocial behaviour. The youth of this country have no respect whatsoever for the police. They laugh at them. You're better off noting down as many incidents as possible, even taking videos, finding out where the perpetrators live, and then go to the council. When they call at the house and say to the parents, we have evidence of antisocial behaviour, keep your kids under control or we'll take the house off you if you live in a council house or housing association, it soon stops. All it takes is for action to be taken, but nobody will do anything, says Ernie. I'm sure there'd be a lot of people who'd be worried about sort of being found out and then being further targeted as a result of it. Another texter says, when I was a teenager and drinking in the parks and stuff, the police would come down on you, take the alcohol away, have a stern word which taught you to respect them, and think, I don't want to do anything wrong because I got in trouble with the police. I haven't seen bobbies on the beat in my area for years. Occasionally I've seen community support officers about every 3 months. We used to have police around here and we just don't anymore. Lots to discuss on this. Jackie is in Oldham and has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000, the number she's called. Jackie, what's your experience been with antisocial behaviour?
Can I just firstly say, I'm really upset and I'm angry at the fact of people like Chris having to live in fear in this country.
Yeah.
How dare the authorities allow somebody to be thinking of having to leave the home because we have feral youths on the streets? My situation was...
Can I just before you, I do want to hear your situation, but I also just want to tell you before we go on to it exactly what you're talking about. This survey of 2,000 people, it says 1 in 7 households have considered leaving their area. 6% have actually done so. So that's more than 1 in 20 people have changed where they live because of facing antisocial behaviour. 28% said antisocial behaviour had made them feel unsafe in their area. About 2/3 of people said those who experienced antisocial behaviour in the last 3 years did not report it, Jackie. So Chris is a very good illustration, a very sad illustration actually as well, of a deep problem in our society. So Jackie, tell us your experience.
Yeah, I had a ginnelway at the side of my property, and
well, what is that? Sorry, I don't know what that is.
It's like a public walkway.
Like an alleyway between houses?
An alleyway,
okay,
yeah.
All right.
And it was a fertile ground for drugs, antisocial behaviour. They would set fire to my fences. There were all sorts going on. And, you know, at the beginning, I was shocked to the extent of how bad this was. And then, to be perfectly honest, and I'm not saying I'm perfect and I've got all the answers, but I just thought I'm not having this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having zero tolerance to this. So I galvanised the community. I galvanised the community with Neighbourhood Watch. I involved the council to look at, could we get this walkway closed, or bollards or keys or something to stop them using it as a ground where they could escape quite easily from the police. I got all the community policing. I rung the actual police on numerous occasions. I collected the drugs bags as evidence. I got hold of my MP. And I persisted because my philosophy was, if I'm getting no peace, then the people in authorities are not going to get any peace, because I refuse to live like this.
Yeah.
And
good attitude.
In the end, the police did an intensive blitz on the area, and I've never had any problems now for about 4 years.
That's interesting, Jackie. That's really interesting.
And I would say to people, you know, we need, if the police are not coming out to antisocial behaviour, galvanise your community. about not accepting this, because if you're going through it, you can guarantee your neighbours are going through it. Are living in fear. Set up groups. Set up WhatsApp groups. Send a letter through your street, your neighbour's door, saying, this is what is happening to me. I'm frightened. What can we do about this as a community? But don't sit in fear and mither as many people as you've got to do until you get some action. But I'm so angry that people are living like this. Vulnerable people in this country, it's not acceptable. It is not acceptable. So get involved.
Jackie, your example is a really, really good one, and you took the initiative. It must have taken a lot of time and effort to do that. You must have had to be very, very determined.
I was, because I wouldn't accept that, people could smoke drugs and the fumes coming over my garden fence, that we'd have rowdy kids outside the house, that we'd have cars damaged, that we'd have, my fences set alight. I refuse to accept that. And, don't let these people win. Kick up as much fuss as you can with all the levers of power in the authorities, and do as much as you can and galvanise your street, your community. Think outside the box and try and get this set upon, because they'll get fed up. The authorities will get fed up in the end if enough people stick together and say, we're not accepting this in our area.
Jackie, I know you were thinking at one stage in the past of running for public office. Would you ever consider doing it again? Because I think there are a lot of people watching and listening to this programme that would think someone like you would be an excellent person to get stuff done with, the title councillor or something like that in front of your, or even MP after your name.
I'll never say never, Peter.
Okay, well, I mean, I don't know if our politics are exactly the same, Jackie, but I would certainly vote for you, and I would want you in my corner and not on the other side, let me tell you, because you're a very determined person, and well done as well, Jackie, and you're a very compassionate person as well, as so many people have been sending lovely messages in about Chris as well. So thank you to Jackie and Oldham for that. Debbie has been in touch and says, my son went for an army recruitment interview on Friday. They have to get in touch with his GP to see if he has had mental health problems. This is the worry with all the woke in schools. They pitch the mental health, which means there'll be no one to recruit for a military of all the kids who have mental illnesses. It's really interesting you mentioned that, actually, because I know a young man who's been trying to get into the RAF for a while, and he is a bit autistic and is on the autistic spectrum, as many people are, and he's been denied entry to the RAF as a result of that previously. He's appealing that, and I just think, hold on a second. People who are on the autistic spectrum would be fantastic for many roles within the military. There are loads of people who have autism who are incredibly successful people in lots of different walks of life. But if you want someone who understands systems, processes, discipline, I mean, loads of autistic people thrive in that atmosphere. So it just seems absolute nonsense to me that that there's been a problem there. Michael's been in touch in regard to antisocial behaviour, asking where the parents. Here's a clue. They're both probably having to do some form of shift work to stay afloat in today's economy. We were lucky when I was younger. A family could just about manage with one wage, my dad's wages. Our mum could be at home managing about 4 kids. So thank you to Michael for that. And Simon in Lancashire says, such is the power and the utter intent to keep treating its own Indigenous population with such contempt, to keep prioritising foreigners, whatever their status, over UK-born citizens. Successive governments' continued refusal to protect us from invasion, the rape, the slaughter of our men, women and children is testament to the commitment to the eradication of British culture and identity. Anyone who still believes this is coincidence or political incompetence needs to wake up. This is a deliberate attempt at replacement. There will be no civil war, national uprising, no patriots joining in mass rebellion, just receding cries of protest followed by muted acceptance and an orderly transition, a very British coup, says Simon in Lancashire. Well, Simon, thank you for that. I don't agree with the Great Replacement theory. I think that is a conspiracy theory. And Simon, I respectfully disagree with your message, but I think there are some points in it which many people will agree with who are listening and watching to this programme. Herbie in Harrow has given me a shout about migration. Herbie, what are your thoughts?
Good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
Well, listen, the thing is he's got to stop the boats. He's got to stop the illegal immigration. He's got to stop paying these people out so we can have the money to defend the country and stop giving them £250,000 homes. For God's sake, where's the money coming from?
But Herbie, we're talking about someone. We're talking about Keir Starmer, but we're also talking about Andy Burnham, who will almost certainly be the Prime Minister in about 2.5-3 weeks' time. He is thinking, apparently, of putting David Miliband in as Foreign Secretary. David Miliband said in 2017 that he thought that we could take 5 times as many asylum seekers, Herbie.
Well, he needs to be in a straitjacket anyway, all said and done with his policies. The thing is, though, Peter, these people do not live in the real world. Can't they see the danger? Look, 2030, Russia could declare war long before then. What you're going to say to Russia, well, look, we'll be ready by 2030, so don't do anything until then. Oh, come on, mate. What the hell's going on?
Well, we need a plan. We need a plan for these things as well. I mean, if a war is declared, you can't just say, oh, right, okay, we'll get a load of ships and things and ships and drones and tanks and guns to defend us. You need to have them ready, don't you, Herbie?
Of course you do. Peter, these are such short-sighted people. How much is the illegal immigration costing us on a daily basis, an annual basis? It'd be far more than what the money is required by the army to defend our country. And fancy not allowing the personnel to be looked after properly in their homes and everything else that's needed. Give it to the illegals, but you can't have it. Oh, come on, Peter. You can't carry on like this. It's got to stop.
Well, it's a really interesting point you make there, Herbie, and just on that housing story, front page of The Sun today, we're going to speak to the former editor of the Sunday Express, David Wooding, who will be with us in just a second, and we'll get his view on that. Herbie, thank you for yours, and if you want to get in touch between now and 10 o'clock to get your voice on the air like Herbie, you can do so, like Jackie as well, 0344 499 1000. Penny says, if antisocial behaviour happened when I was younger, the police stopped it instantly. There was no woke policing then. My godfather was in the flying squad, and they knew how to deal with these low-life thugs. Good for Jackie in Oldham. I would have been with her in a heartbeat. Do you remember the old series about the flying squad, the Sweeney? Get your trousers on, sunshine. You're nicked. Sort of reminds me of Peter Blexley. I sort of think he could have been in the Sweeney. Another person has been in touch and says, problem with the armed forces is using capita for recruitment. My example is my son passed all tests at Cardwell. Capita delaying his medical clearance due to an eczema rash he had at 12 weeks old. Been waiting 19 months for a start date. He'll probably seek alternative employment shortly, which is such a shame. That was such a shame. I really hope that gets sorted out. And I mean, Capita aren't here to defend themselves, but there have been many, many occasions when Capita and other firms like that just take forever to process things. And if someone wants to join the military, get them in as soon as possible. Get them trained, get them ready to fight. Hopefully they won't need to, but they can defend our shores and defend our people. So much to discuss. We'll speak to Dave Wooding in just a second, former editor of the Sunday Express, about all the politics of the day. Plenty of opportunity between now and Petri Hoskin's show at 10 o'clock to give me a call, to get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
So we're going to be talking to David Wooding in just a second. He is the former editor of the Sunday Express. But I just want to remind you about what the Prime Minister's been saying about this huge defence investment plan, lots and lots and lots of money as he deals with many political problems in the twilight of his time as Prime Minister. This is what the Prime Minister said at a speech this morning.
I can also confirm that we are bringing our investment in renewing our nuclear deterrent to £64 billion, a truly national effort, building new submarines, developing a new sovereign warhead, and buying 12 F-35A fighter jets, maintaining our role in guaranteeing British and European security, and leaving our country in a much better and stronger place than we found it.
The Prime Minister talking earlier today. He also said sacrifices would need to be made in order to get the money together.
Some capital projects, for example on roads and energy, which are important but not immediately vital, will no longer go ahead as planned. But this is about taking the necessary choices, the right choices, to protect our nation. It is because we've taken these hard-edged decisions that we are able to increase our spending on defence.
Well, you'll remember, of course, a couple of weeks ago, the Defence Secretary at the time, John Healey, resigned because he thought there wasn't enough money in the plan as it stood. Not much seems to have really changed since then. They've cobbled together a bit more cash. But John Healey, now on the back benches as an ordinary Labour MP, this is what he had to say today.
But threats are still growing. Demands on defence are still rising in this dangerous world, and today's step means that we will be spending as a nation 2.7% of GDP on defence in 2030, the date that NATO now warns we could face a Russian attack. So with European security at stake, would my right honourable friends agree that more needs to be done in the months ahead, beyond the dip, to develop a clear, credible funding plan that will hit 3% and that will meet our NATO commitment of 3.5% by 2035?
I'm not sure he would have got the answer he required there. David Wooding is with us, former editor of the Sunday Express and doyen of the lobby. Has been around Westminster reporting for a very long time. David, from a political angle, what do you make of this plan? Does it tick the boxes? Will it do the business? Because there seem to be quite a lot of people who still aren't happy with it.
Done by smoke and mirrors, Peter. It's not real money. He's just cranked it up a little bit. He's robbed Peter to pay Paul. And the places where all the big cuts could be made are not being made. I mean, he's done things like putting back the A46 in Lincoln, and a few other bits.
I mean, I want people in Lincoln. I want people in Lincoln to have good roads. I'm not scoffing at that. But if he thinks that delaying a few road projects is going to make the massive difference that is needed, yeah. But
the most appalling one, and as one of your callers was saying a moment ago, the £9 billion housing for soldiers and airmen and naval personnel, armed forces personnel, is all going to be delayed. Mm-hmm. Now, it sparks something in my head, this, because in 2011, during the early days of the David Cameron premiership, I ran a newspaper campaign to make the military covenant enshrined in law. Mm-hmm. And we ran a really big, hard-hitting campaign for several months. And in the end, David Cameron agreed to do it. And the law was passed. So I don't even know whether, I haven't had time to look at this, but I wonder whether by not going ahead with this, the Keir Starmer may in fact be in breach of the law by not sticking to the military covenant.
Very interesting.
Which means they have a legal duty to provide good accommodation for our armed forces.
What do you make of this extra money that Andy Burnham is going to have to find in very short order, 4.7 billion? Further cuts to other budgets are going to be needed, or borrowing. He says he's going to stay within Rachel Reeves's fiscal rules, so he's not going to borrow more than that would spook the markets. But if he's got to find 4.7 billion, I mean, let's remember the last time a Prime Minister tried to do roughly that-ish when Keir Starmer tried to cut the welfare budget by 5 billion. His backbenchers weren't too happy.
Well, he's left him with a black hole in his defence spending. He's told him he can't borrow money. Well, I'm sure he doesn't want to borrow money. Britain's £3 trillion in debt. I mean, we're paying absolute billions of pounds in interest. He doesn't want to be borrowing anymore. But Andy Burnham's got all these great plans. I mean, yesterday you heard him singing the John Lennon song, you know, imagine a world where every growth is happening in every country, in every city, and we've got hope in our hearts. He was really laying it on with a trowel.
Have you got hope in your heart, David? That's what I want to know.
Well, I've got despair in my soul.
Because you've seen it all before. We've seen all this, haven't we?
Yeah, but it was a very upbeat speech by Andy Burnham yesterday, and, you know, it was nice to see somebody saying something positive. But really, the foundations for what he's trying to do are not there. I mean, he's just pulled another rug from underneath his feet today, saying, oh, yeah, you'll need to improve it by £5 billion, but you can't borrow to do that. Where's he going to get the money from? I can tell you where he could get the money from. He could cut welfare. I mean, everybody knows that the welfare budget's going to hit £334 billion by the end of this decade. Something's got to be, in fact, that's this year, I think, that figure. So something has to be done about that. But yet again, we hear money's being spent on things that, like that, you know, housing migrants, something we may discuss later. And meanwhile, the safety of the nation is put at risk.
Well, let's talk about housing migrants right now. Rachel Reeves was certainly very upbeat about this a few weeks ago. She was saying migrant hotels are going to close. It's all going to be marvellous. Let's see what the Chancellor has been saying a few days ago.
Billions of pounds of taxpayers' money spent on housing asylum seekers in hotels, leaving people in limbo and shunting the cost of failure onto local communities. We won't let that stand. So I can confirm today that, led by the work of my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, we will be ending the costly use of hotels to house asylum seekers in this Parliament.
Rachel Reeves telling the Commons a few weeks ago about what was happening with migrant hotels. And the fact is that if you close migrant hotels, you've got to put the migrants who aren't processed somewhere, certainly when it comes to asylum seekers. And this astonishing story in The Sun today, which the Home Office seems to have done something of a U-turn on, or attempted U-turn anyway, this evening actually, with the fact that there are these beautiful new homes, £250,000 new homes in Shropshire that asylum seekers are going to be given first refusal on. It is astonishing.
Yes, I think there are about 83 asylum seekers who are going to be housed in about 21 homes on this new estate, beautiful new estate, and it's on the outskirts of a little village in the middle of nowhere, half an hour's walk from the nearest shop, and they're putting all these migrants in there. I don't know who's paying for these houses? I mean, it's just incredible. And the people there are saying...
Well, they're meant to be social housing. There's meant to be housing for people in the area who badly need it, locals who have contributed to the economy in some way.
Well, again, the reason we need all these houses being built, and we've got problems with getting children into our schools, and the NHS waiting lists are so high, is because immigration is going up. And so we're building all these new houses, and the people who see these new houses going up will be horrified to see that actually you won't be able to have any of these. These will be given to people who've come over here while we find somewhere permanent for them to live. So, I mean, that is quite astonishing. I mean, there's still 21,000 migrants living in hotels, despite what Rachel Reeves said, and there's 73,000 in houses of multiple occupation and living on camps. So, I mean, this problem isn't going to go away soon. And again, for all the positive talk by Andy Burnham yesterday, the people living near these communities will say, well, you know, we don't have much hope while all this is going on. There's no hope of us getting a house, no hope of us getting the children into the school of our choice, and no hope of us getting our treatment in the NHS quickly while all these people are coming in.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to this. I just wonder, can Andy Burnham seize the momentum? I mean, there'll be some sort of renewal, certainly. But to me, yesterday, it seemed like grand plans and, you know, hope in our hearts and all the rest of it. But to me, it just was about administration. It was about, number 10 of the North, right, well, we're going to get growth. I mean, show me the politician who doesn't want growth. I just didn't really feel anything in terms of what he actually wanted to change. If he'd said, right, do you know what? Immigration, a word he did not use once in that speech. Immigration is a big problem. We're going to solve that. Welfare, out of control. We're going to solve that. We're going to talk about housing. Housing's a massive issue. We're going to make sure we build those 1.5 million homes. He did say that was going to be a priority, but he didn't give any substance about what he would do with it. So I'm kind of worried about actually what he's going to do and whether he'll just be a bit of a dud.
Absolutely. And it went down really well in the hall, but hey, here's the point. It was in Manchester, and all the people around him were all the people of Manchester.
They all love him anyway.
Yeah, so he's the king of the north. And
is he from the north? Sorry, I missed that. Is Andy Burnham from the north of England? Is he?
I think he may have mentioned it once or twice.
Can we just check that behind the scenes actually? Because okay, we also check if Keir Starmer's father is a toolmaker, because I'm not sure on either of those facts. I don't feel I've been told.
Absolutely. So I think it obviously clearly went down well there, because they've had the benefit of the trams and the buses which have been brought in, and the centre of Manchester, because of businesses and investment and capitalism, is looking better and a bit more sparkly new. So yeah, they'll be happy with what's gone on there. I think when you scratch the surface, Manchester's still got the problems in various states that you have in all inner cities. But nevertheless, they're happy with what he's done there. And they're right to cheer him on. But I don't know what the rest of the country will be thinking. I mean, do we all want to be turned into Manchester, or has he got some grand plan for how? I mean, putting more people into Manchester, running number 10 from the north, is not going to solve the migrant crisis, which is going on the Kent coast. It's not going to solve the welfare problem, which is happening not only in Manchester, but all over the country. So you do need some central power at some stage, but he seems to think that by devolving it all around the country, it'll solve all the problems. That in itself is not the panacea.
We're not entirely clear where he's going to actually live. I mean, if he doesn't live in number 10, do you think that's viable? Do you think that's actually a thing that he can do in the current security atmosphere? I mean, we've heard about Nigel Farage just today putting up a post on Facebook about the fact that he's had an assassination threat.
Yeah, I suspect, Tony Blair used to go up to Sedgefield at weekends, so maybe Andy Burnham might spend an extra day a week in his house off the East Lancs Road in just outside Manchester. But I don't know. I mean, realistically, all he's got his civil servants, his chief of staff. Are they all going to want to move up to Manchester?
Well, exactly. And are they going to do that? It's interesting, David. I think actually, Andy Burnham's background could be helpful, because his mum, I think she's retired now, Eileen. She was a GP's receptionist, so I think she should go to the South Coast and deal with the migrant crisis. Because if there's one person who tells you you're not getting in, GP's receptionists are very, very good at that. So I think she could work well there. David, always good to talk to you. David Whitting there. Thank you. David Whitting there, former editor of the Sunday Express. We'll take some more calls, text, tweets and voice notes right up to 10 o'clock. We'll also have a chat with Petri Hoskin about what's coming up on her programme between 10 and 1, so stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, within the last couple of hours, a patient at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in Glasgow is being tested for a suspected case of Ebola. It comes after the World Health Organization declared the disease outbreak a public health emergency of international concern. Public Health Scotland has said there are currently no confirmed cases of Ebola in Scotland. The risk to the general public remains low. Public Health Scotland is working closely with the UK Health Security Agency to assess routes by which travellers may enter the UK from affected countries. The risk from people arriving in the UK from affected areas is low, and the NHS has safe procedures in place for detecting and managing any such cases. PHS and NHS boards across Scotland, I'm not sure what PHS stands for, but NHS, of course, is National Health Service. Boards across Scotland have well-established protocols for assessing and testing travellers arriving in the UK from areas affected by Ebola where necessary. Where required, contact tracing will occur and contacts may undergo clinical assessment and precautionary testing. The UK Health Security Agency Returning Workers Scheme aims to protect and monitor the health of those who may travel from the UK to affected areas for their work and has been activated, apparently. Organisations deploying workers to affected areas where they may be exposed to Ebola through their work should register their workers in the scheme. So that is Public Health Scotland saying they're testing it, they're going to try and find out what's happening, but this is a suspected case of Ebola in Scotland. PHS is Public Health Scotland. I wasn't familiar with that. So Public Health Scotland and NHS boards across Scotland, well-established protocols, they say. Thank you to one texter who says we haven't got a welfare problem. Why does welfare asylum seekers have to be brought into every conversation? We don't have a welfare problem, really. I think we do. I have no problem, as I always say, with people who are legitimately getting disability benefits, for example. I do have a major problem with the many, many people in this country who can work and choose not to. Zarina says, has a Prime Minister ever resigned and then changed their mind if there's no credible candidate despite not being leader of the party? Could Starmer stay as Prime Minister? No, Zarina, I'm afraid that won't happen. Well, am I afraid? I don't know. Ernie says, hi Peter, I'm sure every migrant in Europe would have seen the Sun's headline, £250,000 house free to asylum seekers, and they're probably making their way to France as we speak. He couldn't make it up. Alex says, I'm pretty sure Oppenheimer was on the autistic spectrum and Alan Turing as well. Without these people, the war would have been lost. I think because we are aware of autism, these people can't be in the forces. Or John Nash with his code-breaking facilities. Yeah, A Beautiful Mind, great film. Many, if really high IQ people are on the spectrum. That's absolutely the case, and I do think we need more of an open mind on that. Molly's been in touch from London. Molly, I think it's the first time you've given us a ring, so I'm very grateful for your call. What would you like to say?
I was watching your programme tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And first that Donaldson bloke is on as well. You know, a fella from the north of Ireland?
Yes, the former leader of the Democratic Unionists in Northern Ireland. Yeah, he is. He's in prison because of the 18 different charges in which he's been found guilty, including rape of a child. It's an absolutely horrendous story, Molly.
Yeah, I mean, I followed it up because I was abused myself. But it's a wonder he got away with it, because Bowie was...
Well, he hasn't got away with it. He's now in prison, Molly, but I'm very, very sorry to hear about your own experience there.
Right, Charlotte. The thing is about this man that killed the children, the baby.
Are you talking about Preston Davey, the two men who adopted that baby, and then there were just horrendous injuries to that baby, and we did cover that at the time. It's dreadful, isn't it?
Of course. Should be brought to justice.
Well, they've been sent to prison for a very, very long time. Molly, thanks for your call. Grace is in London as well and has some thoughts on the Duke of York's views on the ethnicity of people on the BBC. Grace, you're very welcome. What would you like to say?
Well, not the Duke of York, because the Duke of York...
Not the Duke of York, the Archbishop of York. Thank you. Apologies. Maybe that's a Freudian slip. I don't know. But
I'm irritatingly pedantic. Some autistic people do amazing things, as was just mentioned, but I, as an autistic person, am just an irritating pedant.
I love pedantry. Grace, I am incredibly pedantic. I am really pedantic. I was accused at one stage of being too pedantic, and in fact, one journalist who I once corrected when I was a special advisor accused me of being sexist. She said, "Oh, you wouldn't have done that to a male journalist." I then told one of the press officers in the department that I was in about this. Said, "You know, am I sexist when it comes to my pedantry?" And this female press officer said, "Peter, I am happy to go on the record. I'm happy to say it doesn't matter if you're black, white, gay, straight, male, female, whatever. Peter will correct you if you get something wrong."
Glad to hear it. Well, I mean, it kind of relates to what we're talking about to some extent, whereby we're kind of valuing people by the identity group that they're in rather than looking at them as individual human beings. I was thinking a moment ago when you were talking about this horrendous situation with Ebola, there are people suffering unimaginably right now in Congo because of Ebola, and they sometimes lack even running water to properly wash dead bodies. So it's really hard to keep cities under control. Now, I would argue that if the BBC should be doing anything, it should be doing more than it's currently doing to raise awareness of situations like that in our world, whereas Stephen Cottrell is complaining about more diversity. Now, there should be diversity on the BBC, but there actually is.
There's quite a lot of diversity in the BBC. I think we can agree. But those are really good points. We've just run out of time, Grace. But listen, thank you for your call, and no doubt we'll speak again in a day or two. Really appreciate your call. That's Grace in London. There, I think she made some very good points, as she often does. Thanks to Molly as well. Petri Hoskin is here on the other side of the news. Hi, Petri. What's coming up in your programme?
Well, we're going to be picking up on at midnight on the antisocial behaviour, and because it affects so many people. And I mean, I had a horrible neighbour for 23 years. It was just awful. But it was, and her behaviour was antisocial, but it wasn't loud noise. It just depends how you phrase it, doesn't it? How you get the help that you need, how you report it, what is antisocial, how is that affecting you? Because it really does have an effect on your life. So we're going to be looking at that. Defence spending, a dip in spending.
See what you did there?
See what I did. So we're going to be talking about that.
Is it deeply dippy? That's my question.
Deeply, deeply dippy. We're also going to be looking at the latest polling, which is really interesting, actually, because you would have thought that Labour would have come up a little bit higher than it has, just 2 points.
Yeah, they're on 20 in the latest YouGov one, as are the Conservatives. Interesting with Reform UK as well, slipping again to 24 points.
Yeah, so I'm just interested in what do we pay much attention to polls? Because I think we should actually at this point. And we're also going to be looking at the dangers of open water swimming, because we're coming back into a heat wave, and we know that people have died, but there are greater dangers as well. There's also E. coli. There's all sorts of horrible diseases in open water, and people don't realise that when they think, oh, it's really hot, I think I'll go swimming. So just in time for that, we're going to be speaking to a professor of human and applied physiology at the University of Portsmouth, and he's the person that advises about open